Part 61. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 602. After hearing this, Dao Tao and Susu happily kicked off their legs and got off the emperor. With 4 small hands, each of them pulled the emperor's sleeve and walked outside. Grandpa Huang, let's look for mom together. The emperor held hands with 2 little ones instead. They were only over 2 years old, but they were very smart and knew how to coax him with food. Since you agreed to let the babies leave the palace, you are a gentleman, and it is hard to catch up with them, so you should leave the palace to relax. However, you cannot leave the palace wearing a dragon robe, you have to change clothes. After changing his clothes, the emperor took the 2 little guys out of the palace in a carriage. Dabai and Chu Lingfeng looked depressed as they watched the carriage gradually disappear before their eyes. This is the second time for the 2 little guys to ride out of the palace in a carriage. Although they are young, their memory is very good. They still remember the scene when Grandpa Huang and Grandma Huang rode out of the palace together last time. Susu held the emperor's arm and tilted her little head, with a puzzled look on her face. Where are Grandpa Huang and Grandma Huang? Why don't we play together? The emperor felt guilty for a while. It wasn't that he didn't take the queen out to play, but that it would waste too much time to inform the queen to leave the palace again. He took Susu Dao Tao out to play for a while and then went back. He was not really looking for the princess. Susu, let's take your grandma out to play next time, okay? Susu nodded happily, okay, Grandpa Huang can't forget the spicy food. The emperor rubbed Susu's little head and said, Grandpa Huang will keep it in mind. Susu said very seriously, the nest will also be remembered in my heart. The emperor couldn't help laughing when he heard this. Dao Tao lowered the curtain and turned to look at the emperor. Grandpa Emperor, where can we find our father and mother? Well. The emperor was stunned for a moment. He didn't know whether the prince and princess were in Nanzhao or on their way back. I'll take you to see the city wall. Dao Tao and Susu said in unison, okay. After leaving the palace, the emperor took Dao Tao and Susu to buy food. Susu tugged on the emperor's sleeves and suddenly thought of Chaguazi. Grandpa, I want the second fruit. As soon as she left the palace, Susu still remembered to call her grandpa, not Grandpa Emperor. The emperor was a little surprised that Susu still remembered it. He looked at Susu with a doting look on his face and said, okay, I'll buy it later. I have to buy a lot, 3 nests, Mom, Guo Guo, Xiao Guo Guo, Grandma Huang. Susu read out the people she knew well and who were kind to her one by one. At the end of the sentence, she felt confused. She clasped her fingers and finally raised her head helplessly and said to the emperor, Grandpa, I can't count anymore. The emperor said with a smile, Grandpa will count for you, don't be afraid. Susu happily tugged on the emperor's sleeves, waiting for the emperor's grandfather to buy tea fruits for her. Dao Tao tugged on the other sleeve, stood on tiptoes, and looked towards the stall. The emperor bought 2 cakes, handed them to Dao Tao and Susu respectively, and then took them to buy tea fruits. There was someone behind me paying the bill. Susu had something to eat in her hand, so she let go of Grandpa Wang's sleeves and focused on the food. The outer layer of the cake is very crispy and there is meat inside. I love it the most. On Chinese Valentine's Day, the emperor went to buy tea fruits once, so he knew the specific location. As he walked, he lowered his head and glanced at Dao Tao and Susu. The 2 little guys were eating cakes with their heads down. Children are naturally fond of eating and playing, but Dao Tao is very similar to the prince when he was a child. He is smart and loves to learn. After Susu finished eating the cake in her hand, she took out a small handkerchief from her pocket and wiped her mouth, then wiped her hands carefully. After wiping it clean, she put away the handkerchief, raised her head and looked at Grandpa Huang, who was following her with cheerful steps. As we approach the tea and fruit shop, Susu tilted her head and looked not far away. Her eyes finally fell on a black figure. She stared at that person's face for a long time. Mom. Susu stared at the face, looking left and right, and finally ran over and stared at the person with her little face raised. Master, there is a little girl who has been staring at you. After the maid reminded her, Feng Qingjian lowered her eyes and looked over, only to see a very cute little girl staring at her with her big blinking eyes, not avoiding suspicion at all. If it were a man staring at her like this, he would probably will be considered a gangster. Susu stared at that face, searching for memories about Mama in her mind. It was just that they had been apart for too long, and no matter how good the memory was, it would be easy to forget Mama's specific appearance if she was too young. But when I saw the face in front of me, it slowly overlapped with the one in my memory. She tugged on the man's sleeve and said in a milky voice with a bit of excitement, "Mummy, the mud is Mommy." When Feng Qingjian heard the name Mama, she knelt down in front of the little girl and her eyes were level with the little girl. The little girl was so cute. "May I have your name?" Susu excitedly hugged the woman's neck, pouted her little mouth and gave her a bot on her face. "The nest is called Susu, and the numbness is called the nest baby." Feng Qingjian's body froze when she was suddenly kissed. Qingrong was shocked when she saw this scene. This little girl was so brave and dared to kiss her master. After Susu finished the kiss, her big black eyes stared at her without blinking, full of doubts. "Mom, why didn't I kiss the baby?" "Ah," Feng Qingjian looked confused. "Mom. Does I not like the baby anymore?" Susu saw that the woman still didn't kiss her. As she spoke, she began to feel aggrieved, and her eyes turned red. Where has Feng Qingjian seen this posture before? With a soft heart, he imitated Susu's movements on the little girl's cheek and took a squeak. "Anyway, kissing a baby girl is nothing." Susu happily hugged the woman's neck again and said in a baby voice, "Mom, hold the baby." Feng Qingjian didn't understand what Mom meant at first, but now she guessed that it was probably what her mother meant. "I'm not your mom." "You are Mom," Susu said very seriously, thinking of the meat buns in her small shoulder bag. She opened the small shoulder bag, took out the meat buns from it and handed them to the woman. "Mom, second buns." Feng Qingjian looked at the cold meat buns in front of her and had no appetite at all. Meat buns tasted better when they were hot. Susu held the meat buns to the woman's mouth and sent them to her. "Mom loves second buns the most." Feng Qingjian said word by word, "I'm not your mom, this meat bun is not delicious when it's cold." Susu had never eaten cold meat buns. Every time she ate meat buns, they were hot. In her eyes, meat buns were delicious. "Good, leave it to Mama." Feng Qingjian looked at the 2 or 3-year-old child. No matter how much she said to her, she couldn't understand, so she simply stopped explaining. "Where is your home? I'll have someone send you back." After asking, she felt funny again. How could such a small child know where he lived? Susu held the woman's face, holding the meat bun together, and said with a smile, "Mama smiled, it's the best." Feng Qingjian was amused, the little mouth is very sweet. Susu didn't forget the meat bun in her hand, and continued to put it to the woman's mouth. "Mama, good, Mama loves it." Feng Qingjian. Why can't you forget the meat bun? When the emperor was buying tea and fruit, Dao Tao found that her sister was missing, and pulled the emperor's sleeve and shouted, "Grandpa, my sister is missing." The emperor hurriedly looked down when he heard the words. Susu, who was originally standing on his left, had disappeared long ago. He was so scared that his legs softened, and he held the stall beside him to stabilize his body. Susu he didn't even bother to buy tea and fruit, and turned to look for Susu. The emperor ran a few steps, thought of Dao Tao, turned back and picked Dao Tao up. He couldn't lose Dao Tao. Seeing 2 guards not far away, the emperor was so angry. "What are you two doing with your eyes? Hurry up and find Susu." The guards had been following, but they didn't expect that the little princess would be lost without paying attention, so they hurried to find someone. Susu. The emperor held Dao Tao and looked around the store. It was only a short time, so he shouldn't run far. Feng Qingjian was still coaxing the little girl and refused to eat the cold meat buns. Qingrong saw the man holding the little boy and reminded him, "Master, do you think they are looking for the little girl?" Feng Qingjian raised her head and saw a man holding a little boy anxiously looking for something in the crowd. Looking at the little boy in his arms, he looked exactly like the little girl in front of her. They should be looking for this little girl. Feng Qingjian took Susu's hand and asked, "Look, who is that?" Susu raised her head and looked in the direction of the woman's finger. After looking for a while, she saw the figure of Grandpa Huang and said in a baby voice, "That's Grandpa, Kuakuo." It was indeed a relative. Feng Qingjian said again, "Then why don't you go find Grandpa and brother?" Susu happily ran towards Grandpa Huang when she heard that. Thinking of her mother, she ran a few steps and then turned back. After looking around, she didn't see her mother. Feng Qingjian hid when Susu ran over, but from her current angle, she could see Susu and saw her looking back for her. Susu didn't see her mother and ran back again. She was so anxious that tears came out. "Mom, hold the baby, Mom." Feng Qingjian saw Susu crying anxiously, and her heart inexplicably hurt. She covered her chest and looked at Susu's tearful appearance, which was a bit unbearable. Just as she was about to walk over, she saw the man holding the little boy running over, so she hurriedly retreated. The emperor saw Susu in the crowd and ran over as fast as he could. "Susu." The emperor hugged Susu, who was running around in the crowd, and saw her eyes were red and tearful, and he felt so distressed. "Susu, who bullied you?" Susu turned around and saw Grandpa Huang, hugged Grandpa Huang's neck, and said aggrievedly, "Mom, Mom doesn't want the baby anymore." Dao Tao saw her sister crying so sadly, and immediately coaxed her in a baby voice, "Mom wants a sister." The emperor also coaxed her in a gentle voice, "Susu, how could Mom not want Susu baby?" "Mom is leaving." Susu cried out of breath, holding the meat buns in her hand. She felt even more aggrieved. "Bao Bao, Mom is not inferior to Bao Bao." Susu still remembers that every time she gave her mother a meat bun, she would eat it. This time, she didn't eat it, which made her very sad. The emperor looked at the meat bun in Susu's hand and listened to Susu's words. He felt a little strange. If she didn't see the crown princess, Susu wouldn't take out the meat bun. However, Susu not only took it out, but also said that the crown princess didn't eat it. The crown princess left and didn't want her anymore. Did Susu meet the crown princess? The emperor raised his head and glanced around, and felt something was wrong. The crown princess was back, and the prince should have come back too. Even if he really came back, he wouldn't have to hide when he saw Susu. The emperor thought for a while and didn't understand. Seeing Susu crying, he took out a handkerchief to wipe her tears. "Susu, did you see your mother just now?" Susu nodded vigorously, "Yes, Mom is gone again." The emperor asked again, "Where did you see Mama?" Susu turned her head to look at the side, pointed and said, "Right there." The emperor looked in the direction of Susu's finger. There were only pedestrians coming and going, but no sign of the crown princess. Susu continued to hug the emperor's neck, with a meat bun in her hand that she was reluctant to throw away. "Grandpa, find Mama." The emperor looked at Susu and rubbed her little head. "Okay, Grandpa will find her. Let's go buy some tea cakes first, okay?" Susu sobbed twice and nodded, "Okay." The emperor then picked up Susu and walked towards the shop selling tea cakes. Feng Qingjian, who was hiding in the dark, saw Susu being picked up by the man, and saw her crying with red eyes, and she felt very uncomfortable in her heart. Qingrong has been looking at the little girl, and couldn't help but ask, "Master, Did you find that the little girl looks a bit like you? Feng Qingjian smiled, really? Qingrong said, I think there is some similarity in the eyebrows and eyes. That little girl is very cute and likable. She actually called me mom. No, it should be mother. Feng Qingjian thought that she was already 38 years old and didn't know what it felt like to be a mother. In my opinion, the little girl called me mother because she saw that you are beautiful, Qingrong said with a smile. Feng Qingjian also smiled when she heard it. At this time, in the palace. After the queen finished her work, she came to the Hehuan palace to visit her grandchildren. She came all the way to the bedroom, but she only saw Dabai lying at the door of the Hehuan palace. Dabai has always been inseparable from Susu. Now there is no Susu around her, and she is still a little confused. When Chengzi came out, she saw the Empress and hurried forward to salute, Empress. The Empress asked, where are Susu and Dao Tao? Dao Tao and Susu went to see the Emperor. Susu put meat buns in her bag. She saw it with her own eyes. Then she took Dao Tao to find her mother, and finally had no choice but to find the Emperor. Going to the imperial study, the Empress' eyes flashed with doubt, I came from the imperial study. Chengzi seemed to think of something. Could it be that the Emperor took Susu and the others to play? Susu kept clamoring to go out of the palace to find the crown princess, and then went to find the Emperor. I guess she wanted the Emperor to take them out of the palace to find the crown princess. The Empress glanced at Dabai. If Susu went to find the dog, the Emperor would not take Dabai with him, and he would not take Dabai with him when playing in the palace. Is it really out of the palace? Only when he left the palace, Dabai could not follow Susu. The queen is now more certain that the dog Emperor took Dao Tao and Susu out of the palace. He left the palace without taking her. The dog Emperor really doesn't have her in his heart. He only knows how to say nice things every day. Good night. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 603. All talk but no action is the dog Emperor. The queen knew that it was useless to be angry. The dog Emperor did not think of her. Being angry would only hurt the body. She had already thought about it. Then she thought about it. She came to Hehuan Hall to see Susu and Dao Tao. The dog Emperor took the two little guys away. What was she looking at? The anger that he wanted to calm down suddenly bubbled up again. The dog Emperor, he said the day before yesterday that he was too busy to do anything, and now he is out of the palace. You are a liar. The queen returned to Fenji Palace angrily. At this time, the Emperor stood on the city tower with Dao Tao and Susu. He held one in each hand and looked at the official road outside the city. Look, babies, that's the official road. Your father, queen, mother, and concubine will pass by here when they come back. Dao Tao's phoenix eyes, which resembled Xiao Jinyan's, stared unblinkingly at the long official road, but saw no familiar person. He asked the Emperor's grandfather doubtfully, but I didn't see my father and mother in the nest. Susu asked in a sweet voice, Grandpa, I haven't seen the nest yet. Have you seen Ni? The Emperor smiled and said, Grandpa didn't see it either, because your father and mother have not come back yet. Dao Tao asked, is it because father and the others are lost? They don't know this road is the way back. The Emperor still smiled and explained, your father is so smart, how could he get lost while walking? Susu tilted her head and thought for a moment and asked, is it possible that mommy is lost? After hearing this, the Emperor stared at Susu for a long time, and finally laughed out loud, are you saying that your mother-in-law is not smart? Susu remembered that she had seen mom just now, but not her father, and she asked again, did mom have a quarrel with father? The Emperor was a little confused, why do you say that? Susu said seriously, Grandpa and Grandma had a fight, and Grandma ignored Grandpa and refused to open the door. Emperor. The queen would sometimes leave Dao Tao and Susu in Fenji Palace for a few days, but one day the queen suddenly locked them out. No matter how hard he knocked, the queen wouldn't open. Susu was sleeping next to the queen at the time. When he was wondering, he heard Susu ask the queen, "Why doesn't grandma open the door?" The queen replied, "Your grandfather made me angry." When did he make the queen angry? The emperor didn't want to talk about this topic, so he simply diverted the baby's attention. "Okay, we've been out for a while, and it's time to go back for dinner. Otherwise, if we go back late, we won't have anything to eat." Susu's focus was on the last sentence. She went back late and didn't have dinner. Chungzi said there were 6 meatballs for dinner. She loves 6 meatballs the most. Susu hugged the emperor's neck and urged, "Grandpa, go back to the nest." Okay, the emperor happily led the 2 little guys down the tower. Dao Tao looked back at the official road under the city tower, but she still didn't see her father and mother. Returning to the palace just in time for dinner, Susu saw the 6 meatballs on the table and happily ate too. After the emperor returned to the palace, he rushed to Fenji Palace and planned to have dinner with the queen. When we went there, the queen had already finished eating. "Your Majesty came to have dinner, why didn't you inform me in advance?" "I was hungry today, so I had dinner in advance," the queen said lukewarmly. The emperor didn't think much about it. "I was too busy and neglected it. I will inform you in advance next time." When the emperor returned to Yangzin Hall for dinner with an empty stomach, he remembered that the queen's tone was not right. Wouldn't he be angry again? He ordered, "Li Quan, tell the queen that I am going to Fenji Palace tonight." Eunuch Li nodded and said, "I will tell the queen right now." After that, he left. When the queen heard what Eunuch Li said, she just nodded lightly and said, "I understand." Eunuch Li returned to the imperial study to serve him. The emperor asked, "What did the queen say?" Eunuch Li replied, "The queen didn't say anything." The emperor secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He did not do anything to make the queen angry today, and she would not be angry for no reason. He was overthinking it. After the emperor finished his work and hurried to Fenji Palace, when he pushed the door open and went in, he found that the door was bolted from the inside. He knocked on the door and said, "Queen, open the door." Through the door, the queen's faint voice came through, "I have fallen asleep." The emperor refused to give up and said, "Queen, didn't I let Li Quan say in advance that I would come tonight?" The queen said faintly, "But my concubine went to bed early tonight, and the emperor came late." Emperor. After waiting for a while, the queen still had no intention of opening the door. The emperor thought about it and couldn't understand what made the queen angry this time. Do women like to be angry when they are older? The emperor paced back and forth at the door. Unwilling to be shut out by the queen, he stopped and looked at the closed door. "Queen, it's late at night outside and you're naked. Can you let me in?" The emperor waited for a while and saw no response, and then said, "The queen is becoming more and more inconsiderate of me. It's so cold at night. If I stay at the door for a while and cause the cold, won't the queen feel distressed?" The queen lying on the bed rolled her eyes. The dog emperor pretended to be pitiful, thinking she was still a teenager. How shameless! Suddenly, Li Quan's exclamation came from outside the door, "Your Majesty, what's wrong with you?" Upon hearing this, the queen sat up suddenly and looked towards the door. After hesitating for 2 seconds, she threw off the quilt and got out of bed, not even bothering to put on her shoes. The door opened from inside, and the queen hurriedly ran out. "What's wrong, Your Majesty?" The queen looked at the emperor standing outside the door, and before she could react, she was carried horizontally by someone. Who else could it be but the dog emperor? The emperor strode inside, lowered his eyes and glanced at the pair of jade feet. "It's so cold at night, why did you come here without shoes?" The queen couldn't help rolling her eyes. "If you hadn't cheated, would I have run out?" She just didn't say it. I'm afraid that something will happen to the emperor and my mother will blame me. The emperor is fine, what is uniquely calling? The sound just now scared her legs so much that she thought the dog emperor had a sudden illness and fainted. At this moment, she wished that the dog emperor fainted to avoid making her angry. The emperor put the queen on the bed and pulled up the quilt to cover her. She was wearing such thin clothes that it was easy to catch a cold at night. I just dropped something, and Li Quan thought it was a valuable item, so he screamed, the emperor said with a guilty conscience, looking down at the queen's jade feet, and took out a square handkerchief to wipe the dust off her feet. The queen's feet were small and white, and their beauty was not affected even at her age. The queen felt a little itchy on the soles of her feet, and she watched the emperor wiping them lightly, suspecting that he was doing it on purpose. The emperor suddenly spoke, I still remember when you were 15 years old, walking barefoot in the stream, and I felt at that time. The queen was curious and immediately asked, what happened at that time? The emperor looked at the queen with a smile, kiss me, and I will tell you. The corners of the queen's mouth twitched violently. She was already so old, but she was still playing the same tricks as when she was young. The dog emperor was really shameless. However, the queen really wanted to know what the dog emperor was thinking back then. She couldn't let go of her face. After a moment of silence, the emperor pretended to sigh, if the queen doesn't want to know, forget it. The queen gritted her teeth in anger, supported the bed with one hand, leaned over, and kissed the dog emperor on his thick skin. After that, she immediately withdrew, Your Majesty, can you tell me now? The emperor had a smile in his eyes, and he didn't embarrass her. He continued, I thought Linger's feet were really beautiful at the time, and I wanted to put on shoes for you and not show them to others, but only to me. After hearing this, the queen actually blushed. She guessed that the emperor would say something unpleasant, or maybe something nice, but she didn't guess that he would say it like this. It's embarrassing. After being shy, she suddenly understood something, raised her head and asked, Is this why you said there was a snake in the water? When she heard the dog emperor say there was a snake in the water, she was so scared that she stepped on the spot and fell into the water. Fortunately, he was holding her aside, and then he carried her to shore. Now that I think about it, the dog emperor is really a black-bellied person. The emperor did not deny it, you are a girl taking off your shoes in front of a boy, and in the wild. What if someone sees you? The queen said unhappily, You are right. I should have avoided you at that time. You are so ungrateful. She tried to pull back her feet, but the dog emperor held them tightly in his hand. She looked at the dog emperor in confusion, Your Majesty. The emperor held her jade feet, supported the bed with one hand, and whispered in the queen's ear, I didn't lie to you. Linger's feet are really beautiful. Although she is old, it doesn't affect her beauty at all. The queen was a little moved after hearing the first half of the sentence, but after hearing the second half, she felt that the dog emperor disliked her because she was old. Your Majesty, do you dislike my age? You don't look like a girl anymore, right? Then go find someone else. There are so many teenage women in the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards. Linger, what are you talking about? How could I dislike you? If I disliked your age, why would I come to Fenji Palace so often? If I disliked you, how could I be so obsessed with you every time? The emperor said the last words and kissed the queen's neck. Then he kissed her lips again. The queen was a little dizzy by these words, especially because the emperor was so close to her, which made her heart beat faster immediately. She found that she might just like the dog emperor's dark and seductive methods, so every time she was seduced, she would blush and feel shy. Your Majesty. Just when the queen was distracted, she found that the dog emperor had taken off his clothes and got on the bed without knowing when. She didn't know when he had torn her clothes open. The dog emperor was really good at this. Linger, give me a daughter. The queen's eyes were filled with water vapor. When she heard the emperor's words, she was stunned for a long time. Since giving birth to Ur, her body was injured. Although she recovered almost, she never got pregnant again. She always wanted to have a daughter, but she didn't get pregnant for more than 10 years. It's not because of the emperor. In fact, although the emperor favored other women in recent years, he would come to Fenji Palace most of the time every month. In the eyes of outsiders, it is said that the emperor respects her as the queen. She also thinks so. After all, the rules are there. Whether the emperor wants to go to the queen's palace or not, the number of days every month is fixed. During this period, the emperor explained the reason. Although she suspected that the emperor was trying to coax her and deliberately said nice things. But she believed it 80%, and she deducted the remaining 20 points. Because during the period the emperor said, other concubines did not get pregnant, but concubine Ning got pregnant. She said she was drunk, and she thought she couldn't help it. Otherwise, the emperor is not Luziawai, how could he hold back if the beauty is pregnant? Although the emperor would stay up until the 5th watch every time he came to Fenji Palace, as if he was very hungry. However, the emperor promised her not to visit other women, and he did so. Ever since she came back from hunting in Kiowa, the queen always thought of the past. In fact, she also had many shortcomings and a bad temper. The emperor was a little dissatisfied with her distraction. Ling-er, what are you thinking about? The queen said weakly, I am tired and want to sleep. The emperor was very interested at this time. I rarely have an early rest tonight. Ling-er is willing to leave me alone. The queen said angrily, when the emperor went out to play, why didn't he think of taking his concubine with him? The emperor will now understand why he came to Fenji Palace without dinner and almost couldn't get in when he came to sleep. If he hadn't been clever and resourceful, he would have had to guard the empty room alone tonight. I took the time to leave the palace just to coax Susu. I wanted to leave as soon as possible and come back quickly, so I didn't inform you. I will definitely take you out to play next time. Don't be angry, the emperor coaxed her nicely. Because the emperor discovered that he had to use this tone to coax the queen. If he coaxed more, the queen's anger would dissipate. The queen then hummed with satisfaction, that's pretty much it. After making the queen happy, the emperor worked harder to please her. Asterisk. Early the next morning, Susu finished her breakfast, stuffed 2 meat buns into her bag, and then sat on the threshold of Hehuan Hall. Dabai was lying lazily behind her. When Changliang Yuansu visited the Fenji Palace to pay her respects to her aunt, she passed by the Hehuan Palace and saw Susu sitting on the threshold. She stopped and asked with a smile, Susu, what are you doing? Susu said in a sweet voice, stay here and wait for mommy to come back. Changliang Yuan thought of something and continued to smile, I know where you are. Where is Wo Mama? Susu often saw Changliang Yuan at Grandma Wang's place, so she was familiar with her, so she immediately stood up and trotted over. Dabai also stood up and walked over. When Changliang Yuan saw Dabai approaching, she instinctively wanted to step back. Would she be afraid of the tiger? Ask Dabai to leave, and I'll tell you. Susu turned around and glanced at Dabai. After seeing mommy yesterday, she missed mommy even more. In order to see mommy quickly, she turned around and ran to Dabai again. Dabai also stopped and looked at Susu with his huge head raised. Changliang Yuan looked at Susu from a distance and didn't know what method she used. She saw Dabai walking inside. After Dabai left, Susu ran back and said, Who left, where is Wamo? Changliang Yuan raised her head and looked around a few times, and found that there was no one around, so she said to Susu, I'm going to your Grandma Wang's place. How about you come with me and I'll tell you. Good night, Spicy. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. The male and female protagonists have rushed back without stopping. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yunsi. Chapter 604. When Susu heard that they were going to the Empress, she hesitated for a moment and nodded, I miss Grandma too. Chang Liangyuan thought that children were easy to deceive, so she smiled and took Susu's hand, then how about we go together? Although Susu was somewhat familiar with Chang Liangyuan, she didn't like holding hands with her. After being held, she pulled her hand back. Chang Liangyuan just held her hand casually without any force, and Susu easily pulled it back. Looking for Grandma. Susu protected her shoulder bag with one hand, and her two short legs walked briskly on the bluestone road. Chang Liangyuan looked at Susu's happy look, snorted in her heart, you won't be able to laugh later, and she followed. Huaixiang followed behind slowly. After the people left, Dabai's huge head poked out from behind the door, watching Susu's little figure jumping farther and farther away. After a long time, Dabai seemed to have made up his mind, raised his front legs and walked out. He didn't dare to run, for fear of being discovered by them, so he could only follow behind secretly. It was a long way from the East Palace to Fenji Palace. Susu usually went to Fenji Palace with Dabai on her back. As time went by, she didn't like walking anymore. As soon as she walked out of the East Palace, she started to feel tired. She stretched out her hand and shouted to Chang Liangyuan, I want to hold you. Carry me. Chang Liangyuan frowned when she saw Susu suddenly want to hold her. She had dressed up specially today. What if she got her clothes wrinkled? Children are very naughty. What if they messed up her hair? For her own purpose, she patiently said, you've only walked for a while. You'll be there soon. Susu was a child after all. Once she didn't want to walk, she would act like a spoiled child, I can't walk anymore. Let's go out and play. Grandpa will hold me. If it was the Queen and the Emperor, they would have laughed so hard when they saw Susu acting like a spoiled child and wanting to be held, but in Chang Liangyuan's eyes, it was just a deliberate show-off, showing off that the Emperor held her, spoiled her, and was particularly good to her. Chang Liangyuan snorted coldly. Sure enough, she was just like your mother, good at pleasing others, and showing off after being favored. Walk by yourself. Susu shook her head, I want to hold you in my arms. Chang Liangyuan said it several times, but Susu refused to walk by herself and insisted on being held in her arms. If it were any other time, she would not bother to care. But today was a good opportunity, and if she missed it, she would miss it. She glanced at Huaixiang behind her and said, I'll let Huaixiang hold you, okay. Susu glanced at Huaixiang and found that she was not very familiar with him. She shook her head, no, I want you to hold me. Chang Liangyuan gritted her teeth in anger. Who can hold her? He wanted her to hold him, which was obviously a deliberate fault. For her own purpose, she had to endure it. Then you have to be obedient, then I will hold you. Susu patted her little chest and said, baby is the best. Chang Liangyuan then bent down and squatted, spreading her arms to hold Susu, but she didn't hold her up. She frowned and tried again. She did hold her up, but she was too heavy, and she used all her strength to hold her up. Susu loves to eat, and weighs a little more than her brother, 30 kilograms. Chang Liangyuan was spoiled since she was a child. She couldn't carry anything on her shoulders or hands, so it was very difficult to carry her. Chang Liangyuan had never carried such a heavy thing before. She took a breath every 2 steps. Susu didn't have to walk, so she waved her hands happily. Chang Liangyuan was sweating after walking for a while. She was so angry when she heard Susu's laughter that she wanted to throw Susu away. Finally, she couldn't carry her anymore, so she put Susu down and said, I won't move. You walk by yourself. As she said that, she began to tidy up her appearance. She found that her clothes were wrinkled and her cheeks were covered with sweat. She guessed that her makeup might be ruined without looking in the mirror. Looking at Susu again, she was laughing happily, as if she was laughing at her. Chang Liangyuan clenched the handkerchief in her hand and looked at the lotus pond not far away. If Susu drowned, no one would know and she would not be found out. She suppressed the resentment on her face and said with a smile, "Susu, don't you want to know where your mom is?" Susu immediately asked seriously, "Where is my mom?" Chang Liangyuan pointed to the lotus pond not far away and said to Susu, "Do you see the lotus pond? There is a small boat next to the lotus pond. You can find your mom on the boat." Susu stared at the direction of Chang Liangyuan's finger for a long time. In the summer, Grandpa Huang took her to the lotus pond to play. She still remembered it. Knowing that her mom was there, she said happily, "Xie ni." After that, she ran towards the lotus pond with a cheerful step. Chang Liangyuan raised the corner of her lips, and a malicious smile flashed in her eyes. She looked around. The weather was cool in autumn, and the wind was strong today. This place was also relatively remote, and few people would come. She chased after it with a smile. Susu jumped and jumped all the way to the lotus pond. Seeing the boat on the side, she walked over and stared at the boat with her beautiful big eyes. Chang Liangyuan came over and stopped behind Susu. Seeing that Susu was still not going up, she urged, "Susu, go up." Susu reached out and tugged at Chang Liangyuan's sleeve, looking up at her, "Go up with me." Chang Liangyuan pulled back her sleeve with force, holding back her anger and said, "You are the one who wants to find Mama, of course you go up by yourself, don't you want to see Mama?" Susu hesitated and said, "But Grandpa said that children can't play by the water alone, it will be very dangerous." Chang Liangyuan didn't expect that a child would have so many concerns. "Then don't you want to see Mama right away? You can see her as long as you get on the boat." Susu clasped her fingers, and even her eyebrows were twisted together in confusion. "Grandpa won't let me go up alone. I won't play well if I play alone." Chang Liangyuan. Susu reached out to pull Chang Liangyuan's sleeve again, "If you go up with me, Grandpa won't be angry." Chang Liangyuan's patience had long been exhausted. She looked around again and saw that there was no one. Then she retracted her gaze and looked at Susu, and her eyes suddenly became vicious. "Susu, if you want to blame someone, blame your mother. She always occupied the prince. Otherwise, how could I have entered the palace for so many years and still not been able to sleep with him? If I had slept with him, I would have sons and daughters, who would be smarter and cuter than you, and would be loved by the emperor and the queen. As long as you didn't come, the emperor and the queen would definitely be furious. It would be better if your mother went crazy because of losing her daughter. Even if she didn't go crazy, I would make her suffer." Susu stared at Chang Liangyuan in confusion. She was too young to understand what she was saying at all. After Chang Liangyuan finished speaking, she pushed Susu into the lotus pond with a cruel heart. With a plop, Susu fell into the water, splashing a lot of water. Susu flapped her arms, her small body floating in the water, and would be submerged in the water again in the next second. She didn't know why Chang Liangyuan pushed her into the water. After seeing Susu fall into the water, Chang Liangyuan turned around and left. No one came to rescue her, and a child drowned quickly. When she was discovered, she would only think that Susu fell into the water because she was playing, and there was no need to worry about whether someone did it on purpose. At this moment, there was a sudden tiger roar, a whoop. The sound was deafening, and Chang Liangyuan's back was cold. Then there was another tiger roar. Huaixiang was shocked, and he ran while shouting, "The tiger is coming, the tiger is coming." Chang Liangyuan raised her head and looked in the direction where Huaixiang was staring, and saw a white figure running towards her at a speed that was faster than thunder. Chang Liangyuan was so scared that her face turned pale, and when she wanted to dodge, she found that her legs were weak and she couldn't move. Dabai ran over at the fastest speed, knocked Chang Liangyuan into the lotus pond, and jumped in as well. Plop! Two huge splashes of water appeared on the lake. Chang Liangyuan was already delicate, how could she bear the tiger's impact? She felt that her internal organs were displaced, and just as she felt a sharp pain, she fell into the water. She couldn't swim and began to struggle desperately, help, help. Dabai swam to Susu at the fastest speed, and used his huge head to keep arching Susu's body, trying to lift Susu out of the water. Susu drank several sips of water, and felt a little dizzy. His body floated to the surface, but there was no reaction. Dabai didn't give up. It continued to arch Susu's body, and its strong limbs swam like a dog paddling, trying to arch Susu to the shore. Xiao Jinyu was free today and planned to go see the two little babies. Suddenly, he heard a tiger roar. He stopped and looked around. Is Susu nearby? There was only a tiger in the Hehuan Palace in the palace, that is, Dabai, the tiger raised by Susu. Then he heard another tiger roar. Dabai rarely roared, and usually only wow and it was over. Xiao Jinyu had a bad premonition and ran towards the direction of the tiger roar without thinking. When Xiao Jinyu arrived at the lotus pond, he saw Dabai arching Susu to the shore. He came to Susu as fast as he could. Seeing that Susu was soaked, his eyes were closed, and his legs were weak with fear. Susu, Susu, wake up. Susu seemed to be asleep and had no reaction at all. Xiao Jinyu picked up Susu and ran, fearing that it would be too late if he was late, and had no time to care about the other person in the water. Dabai was about to go ashore to catch up, but he looked back at Chang Liangyuan struggling in the water and wanted to go back. When the tiger bites Chang Liangyuan's arm, it drags her ashore. Huaixiang, who was not far away, saw this scene and was too scared to move forward. He wanted to wait until the tiger left before moving forward. After Dabai got ashore, he not only did not let Chang Liangyuan go, but ran with her arm in his mouth to chase Xiao Jinyu. At this time, Chang Liangyuan fainted because of drowning and did not know that she was being carried by the tiger. Huaixiang watched his master being carried by the tiger and ran away, but did not dare to stop it, so he could only call for help. When the tiger dragged her, Chang Liangyuan's head was hit several times, and the clothes on her back were worn out, and her skin was also worn out, bloody and fleshy, not to mention other places. Xiao Jinyu ran while holding Susu and shouted, "Call the imperial doctor quickly." Seeing this, the guards went to call the imperial doctor without saying a word. Xiao Jinyu returned to the Hehuan Palace with Susu and ran straight inside. When Chengzi came out of the inner room, she saw Xiao Jinyu holding Susu and running all the way. Susu's clothes and hair were obviously soaked. Suddenly, she had a bad premonition. She didn't care about the things in her hands and went to meet him. "Prince Yu, what happened to Susu?" "Susu drowned," Xiao Jinyu said and walked into the house without stopping. Chengzi's legs softened and she fell to the ground. The wooden basin in her hand also fell down. Tears fell down and she blamed herself. Susu was used to going out since she was a child. Dabai was always by her side. After many times, she was relieved. Who knew that something happened this time? When Chengzi was scared, she saw Dabai dragging a person in. After entering, Dabai put the person down and ran out of the house. Chengzi was stunned for a while, then wiped her tears. "The masters are not at home, she needs to stay calm." She got up from the ground, called the little rabbit, and asked him to inform the emperor and the queen that Susu had drowned. After the little rabbit ran out, she ordered the little maid to boil hot water. How cold would it be to fall into the water in such a cold day? After giving the order, she glanced at the person on the ground, and when she saw a pale face, She recognized it as Chang Liangyuan. Why did Dabai bring her here? Looking at the wet clothes, could it be that Susu's drowning was related to her? The more Changzi thought about it, the more scared she became, but the most important thing now was Susu. At this time, the imperial physician was carried in by 2 guards. No one in the palace didn't know how favored Susu was. The emperor favored her, the queen favored her, and Prince Yu favored her, so anything related to Susu had to be taken very seriously. The imperial physician walked slowly, so the guards had to carry him in order to save time. Changzi pulled the imperial physician and ran inside. Imperial physician, hurry up, Susu has fainted. The imperial physician was dragged in by Changzi. After entering, he was dragged to the bed by Xiao Jinyu. Hurry up and check on Susu, Susu is in trouble, your life is in danger. The imperial physician felt that he was about to fall apart. Hearing that his life was in danger, he shuddered with fear and immediately began to diagnose the pulse. The emperor was reviewing memorials in the imperial study. No one helped him and he had to work overtime to complete it. When the little rabbit came, he was taken in by Eunuch Li after explaining the reason. The little rabbit knelt on the ground with a plop, Your Majesty, the little princess is in trouble. The emperor put down the memorial in his hand and asked coldly, what happened? The little rabbit said anxiously, the little princess drowned. The emperor didn't react for a while, and his brain was blank for a while. There were too many palace maids, eunuchs, and concubines who drowned in the palace. He had heard a lot about these things, whether they were man-made or accidental. But at this moment, it seemed as if something collapsed, which scared him. Seeing that the emperor was silent, Eunuch Li called out cautiously, Your Majesty. After the emperor reacted, he threw away the red brush in his hand, stood up and walked out. Eunuch Li was stunned for a moment, and immediately chased after him. The emperor went straight to the Hehuan palace, and he didn't even look at the woman lying on the ground, and walked straight into Susu's boudoir. At this time, in the room, the imperial doctor was still treating Susu. Changzi stared at Susu while wiping tears. Xiao Jinyu paced back and forth in front of the bed anxiously. Seeing his father coming, he stepped forward and said, Father. The emperor didn't even look at Xiao Jinyu, but went straight to the bed and saw Susu lying on the bed with her eyes closed, her face pale and bloodless, her hair still wet, and her clothes had been changed into dry clothes. Imperial doctor, how is Susu now? Good night. I wrote too much. Originally this chapter was about the heroine and the others coming back. By the way, I ask for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 605. The imperial doctor said cautiously, back to the emperor, the little princess has been drowning for a long time and her pulse is a little weak. I'm afraid. The emperor interrupted the imperial doctor in a cold voice, speak to me properly. If anything happens to Susu, I want you to be buried with her. The imperial doctor's legs shook in fear, and he nodded quickly. Wyken understands that Wyken will do his best to treat him. After saying that, he continued to diagnose and treat Susu. The emperor raised his head and looked at his son. What on earth is going on? Xiao Jinyu told the scene he just saw. Father, that's all I know. For more details, I have to ask Susu and Chang Liangyuan. When Changzi came in just now, he said that Dabai had brought Chang Liangyuan back, which reminded him that there seemed to be someone else in the water, probably Chang Liangyuan. The emperor glanced at Dabai in the room with some disbelief. It was standing not far away, staring at the bed with a pair of lake blue eyes without blinking. He looked away and looked at his son. You said it was Dabai who rescued Susu from the water. Xiao Jinyu nodded. Well, when I arrived, I saw Dabai in the water, using his head to lift Susu to the shore. The emperor couldn't help but said, I didn't expect Dabai to be so smart and spiritual. Not only did he protect the savior, but he also knew how to dive into the savior. It's not in vain that Susu is so good to Dabai. Xiao Jinya glanced at Dabai, and he hadn't moved since he came in. He had kept that movement. If he could speak, he would have kept asking how Susu was doing. Father is right, Dabai is indeed very spiritual and has always followed Susu. At this time, the queen rushed over after hearing the news, and was helped in by Qingying. When she first learned that Susu had drowned, her legs became weak and she couldn't even walk, so she had to rely on Qingying to support her. What's wrong with Susu? The queen's voice trembled violently, and when she saw Susu on the bed, her legs went weak again. The emperor stood up as quickly as possible, supported the queen, pretended to be calm and comforted. The imperial doctor is treating her, don't worry. In fact, the emperor himself was anxious and fearful. If something happened to the granddaughter he had always doted on, how could he remain as secure as a mountain? Even though the emperor comforted her, the queen was still shaking violently, and she had to rely on the emperor's hold to keep her from being forced to stand still. Susu is a baby, something happened, and she is a little confused. How could Susu drown? Although she is smart, she knows not to go to dangerous places. The emperor said coldly, I know that Susu is very smart. I also told her not to go to the water alone. I will definitely find out about this matter. After a while, the imperial doctor said, Your Majesty, the little princess's life is no longer in danger, and her pulse is more stable than before. The emperor saw that Susu had her eyes closed and showed no sign of waking up, and asked, Why hasn't Susu woke up yet? The imperial doctor replied, back to the emperor, I drowned for a long time. I woke up after a while. After confirming that Susu was fine, everyone breathed a sigh of relief, but Susu hadn't woken up yet and was still a little worried. Xiao Jinyu thought of Chang Liangyuan, who was brought back by Dabai, and reminded him, Father, Chang Liangyuan is still outside, and her life or death is unknown. The emperor ordered, Physician, go over and take a look. When she wakes up, I will interrogate her properly. I obey my orders. After receiving the order, the imperial doctor withdrew. After the imperial doctor left, the queen trembled and came to the bedside and sat down. Her eyes never left Susu's body, looking at the little person lying there, feeling extremely distressed. She turned to look at the emperor. Is Susu's drowning related to Chang Liangyuan? After so many years in the harem, she had seen countless Gongdo's hands cut off, and she had also dealt with drowning issues several times. The sudden mention of Chang Liangyuan made her suspicious. The emperor said, Chang Liangyuan was at the scene and fell into the water. The specific situation will not be known until Susu wakes up and Chang Liangyuan wakes up. Although Susu is only over 2 years old, she is much smarter than other children of the same age. She can also express her thoughts and ask questions about what happened. The queen said harsh words, If Chang Liangyuan dares to hurt Susu, I will never let her go. On weekdays, the queen took care of her parents' family and her eldest brother's feelings, so she was tolerant to Chang Liangyuan again and again. But Susu was her precious granddaughter, and she felt distressed even if she lost a hair. If she deliberately murdered her, it would have touched her bottom line, so she couldn't be blamed. The emperor sat next to the queen. After comforting her, his eyes were full of anger. When the truth is found out, I will not let such a vicious woman go. Although Chang Liangyuan fell into the water for a long time, she was still an adult and woke up after the imperial doctor diagnosed her. When Chang Liangyuan woke up, she first felt severe pain all over her body, as if she had been run over by a car, and she was so painful that she couldn't breathe. Huaixiang's face turned pale with fright. Even when he saw Chang Liangyuan waking up, he was still trembling with fright. Master, you are finally awake. This was not the first time that Chang Liangyuan fell into the water. Last time she woke up, she only had signs of dizziness and no severe pain all over her body. This time it was almost painful. She frowned and said, "What's going on? Why does my body hurt so much?" "Master, after you fell into the water, you were rescued from the water by a tiger, and then the tiger bit your arm and dragged you all the way," Huaixiang said. Chang Liangyuan was frightened after hearing this. Was she caught by a tiger and ran away? She subconsciously lowered her head to check her body, and saw that her arm was tied with white gauze several times. Just a slight movement would cause severe pain. "It hurts, it hurts." Where had Chang Liangyuan ever been treated like this? The pain was so painful that I could hardly speak. After she calmed down, Chang Liangyuan suddenly thought of Susu. She hurriedly asked, "How is Susu? Is she dead?" Huaixiang said, "Master, my servants don't know either. They only know that the emperor and the queen know about it. They are in the Hehuan hall. The emperor and the queen are very angry." Chang Liangyuan clenched the quilt, feeling a little uneasy. What if Susu was not dead? What if the emperor and the queen knew the truth? Just when Chang Liangyuan was uneasy, the eunuch's high-pitched voice came from the door, "The emperor and the queen have arrived." Chang Liangyuan's heart skipped a few beats and she looked nervously at the door, only to see an emperor and empress wearing bright yellow dragon robes walking in one after another. The maid in the room knelt on the floor and said, "May the emperor be blessed with peace and prosperity, and the queen may be blessed with peace of mind." Chang Liangyuan wanted to salute, but after struggling for several times she couldn't get up. She could only say helplessly, "Your Majesty and Queen, I really can't get up." The emperor and the queen sat down on the couch one after another. The emperor looked at Chang Liangyuan coldly, "Put aside the salutes first. I'm here to ask you, why did Susu drown?" Chang Liangyuan's eyes turned sharply. No matter what, she couldn't let the emperor know that she was the one who pushed Susu into the water. She said weakly, "Your Majesty, I saw Susu playing by the lotus pond. I was afraid that she was too young to know the danger, so I went over to take her away. But as soon as I went over, I found Susu falling into the lotus pond. I jumped in because I was anxious to save Susu, but I didn't expect that the water was very deep. Not only did I fail to save Susu, I almost drowned myself." After Chang Liangyuan finished speaking, she hurriedly asked, "Is Susu okay?" The emperor stared at Chang Liangyuan with questioning eyes, "Is what you said true? Susu's drowning has nothing to do with you." Chang Liangyuan said in a panicked tone, "Your Majesty, even if you give me 100 courages, you wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Susu is so young, so cute and sensible, it's too late for me to like you, so how could I do it, to harm her?" Chang Liangyuan burst into tears as she spoke, acting as if she was very kind and would not harm others. The queen snorted coldly, "I will ask you when Susu wakes up. If there is any lie, I will not let you go." Chang Liangyuan was a little scared when she heard this. "Is Susu not dead yet?" "Empress, Susu is young and doesn't understand anything. I wanted to save her, but she was afraid and thought it was me who pushed me." The queen said, "Susu is not as stupid as you think." The emperor also said, "Susu is very smart. Whether what you said is true or false, you will know when Susu wakes up and asks, so you can take care of yourself." After the emperor finished speaking, he took the queen and left. Chang Liangyuan collapsed on the bed. At this moment, she hoped that Susu would never wake up, otherwise she would be doomed if Susu talked nonsense. But now she can't even get up, what should I do? Seeing Huaixiang on the side, she shouted, "Huaixiang, come here." Huaixiang came over and asked, "Master, what are your orders?" Chang Liangyuan said, "You secretly go to Hehuan Hall to see if Susu wakes up. If she is still angry, find an opportunity to get rid of her." "Master, I don't dare." Huaixiang was so frightened that she shivered. Chang Liangyuan said angrily, "What are you afraid of? If Susu wakes up and says that I pushed her into the water, Do you think you can escape if something happens to me? It is said that both prosperity and loss lead to loss. If something happens to the master, the slaves will naturally not be able to escape. Huaixiang was indeed afraid, and she was also afraid of death, so she could only risk her life. Hehuan Hall. The emperor and queen have been guarding Susu, and Xiao Jinyu is also watching. The queen couldn't help but feel anxious. Why isn't Susu awake yet? The emperor comforted him, if you wait a little longer, Susu will definitely wake up. Chengzi also stayed there for a long time. Thinking that Susu loved cakes the most, she secretly wiped her tears and turned around to go into your kitchen. When Susu woke up, she could look at the cakes she made. In everyone's expectation, Susu, who had been unconscious for a long time, finally opened her eyes. The emperor excitedly said to the queen, "Susu is awake." The queen held Susu's little hand excitedly. "Susu, you are finally awake, you scared grandma to death." Xiao Jinyu quickly came to the bedside, looked at Susu who had woken up, and comforted her. "Susu, don't be afraid. Grandpa, Grandma, and Uncle Wang are all protecting you." Susu was stunned for a while before she came to her senses. She said in a milky voice, "Grandpa and Grandma, there's a lot of water." The emperor picked up Susu from the bed and put her in his arms. He held her tightly and comforted her with a gentle voice, "It's okay, Susu, there is no water anymore." Susu felt a sense of security being hugged, and she continued, "Grandpa, Wo is obedient. It's dangerous to be alone by the water. Wo didn't go to the boat." The emperor nodded. "Grandpa knows that Susu is very good and smart. Grandpa wants to reward you." Susu Nyanyo asked, "Is it a good time?" The emperor nodded and responded without thinking, "Well, whatever Susu likes to eat, Grandpa will buy it for you." The queen looked at Susu's cute and sensible look, feeling distressed and pleased. "Susu, how did you fall into the water?" Susu said, "Wo was pushed into the water." Wo couldn't understand what she said. She said to go to the lotus pond and get on the boat and you could see mommy. Wo was very obedient, but she was still very angry, so she pushed her away. Nest. The queen's heart was aflame after hearing this, and her hands were shaking with anger. "Do you know who Susu is?" Susu thought for a while and said, "She said she was going to Grandma's place." The queen asked again, "Do you often go to Grandma's place?" Susu nodded. The queen gritted her teeth and said, "It was Chang Liangyuan who pushed Susu into the water." At this moment, Chengzi walked in and said, "Your Majesty, Your Majesty, Your Majesty, I caught a sneaky person in the yard." Then he asked the little rabbit to bring the person in. Huaixiang lowered her head and begged for mercy, "Your Majesty, please spare me." The queen only took a glance and recognized who the kneeling maid was. "You are the maid next to Chang Liangyuan, what are you doing sneaking here?" Huaixiang explained, "The maid just came to visit the little princess, I didn't do anything." Chengzi retorted, "You didn't visit Susu openly, but you sneaked in the corner and said you didn't do anything." The emperor's eyes turned cold. "If you don't tell the truth, take him out and torture him." Huaixiang was so scared that her body softened and she almost collapsed on the ground when she heard the torture. "No, Your Majesty, I will tell you, I will tell you." Huaixiang told Zhang Chang Liangyuan what she had done. "It was Chang Liangyuan, not me, I was just following orders." The emperor and the queen were furious when they learned that it was Chang Liangyuan. "She has a vicious heart and tells lies all the time. Come here, lock up Chang Liangyuan and interrogate her severely." "I'll do it." Xiao Jinyu was so angry that he responded and turned around and walked out. Chang Liangyuan, who was still waiting for news, thought Huaixiang had returned when she heard the noise. She looked up and saw a group of guards coming in, and then she saw Xiao Jinyu, and she was stunned for a moment. Xiao Jinyu ordered, "Take Chang Liangyuan away." Two guards strode forward, without a trace of pity. grabbed Chang Liangyuan's arms and pulled her up. Chang Liangyuan was in great pain just lying down. How could she bear such a rough pull? She screamed in pain, and Xiao Jinyu took out a rag and stuffed it into Chang Liangyuan's mouth, and she was able to calm down. You have murdered the emperor's grandson, and your death is coming. Chang Liangyuan was dragged all the way by the guards. Because the rag was stuffed in her mouth, she couldn't scream no matter how painful it was, and could only shake her head and struggle desperately. After a day of recuperation, Susu has recovered her former vitality. She eats the cake made by Chengzi and puts a piece of cake in her bag. Leave it for Mama. The emperor and the queen were completely relieved when they saw that Susu was not frightened by falling into the water. Grandpa, when will Mama come back? The emperor has received the news that the prince and the princess have returned and will enter the city today. You will see your father and mother soon. Susu jumped up happily and took Chengzi's hand. Make it for Mama. Okay, I'll do it right away. Chengzi smiled and went into the kitchen. After leaving the Hehuan palace, the queen went directly to the Tianlao. Susu sat on the threshold with food waiting for Mama to come back. Dabai was next to Susu. No matter what the reason was, it would stay by Susu's side. Good night. Please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 606. When Chengzi came out, she didn't see Susu. After experiencing it once, she already had a shadow in her heart. Susu. The little rabbit saw the panic on Chengzi's face and said, Chengzi, the little princess is sitting on the threshold. After Chengzi heard this, she hurried to the door and saw a small figure sitting on the threshold, holding a meat bun and chewing it. Little rabbit looked at the little princess and said, the little princess said she would wait for the princess here. Chengzi sighed, the prince and princess have been away from the palace for too long. No wonder Susu misses them so much. Fortunately, they are back soon, otherwise Susu would be disappointed again. After Chengzi finished speaking, she turned around and told the little rabbit, just watch. Little rabbit nodded, I will. Chengzi felt relieved and got back to work in the small kitchen. Tianlao. The queen of Tianlao came twice, thinking she would not come again, but she came again. The queen held up her handkerchief and covered her nose, watching as the jailer brought Chang Liangyuan up and then forced her to kneel down. Chang Liangyuan had injuries on her body and was tortured in prison. Now her hair was disheveled and she had long lost her former noble appearance. There were several whip marks on his cheeks, which were a bit shocking. The white prison clothes on his body had been stained red with blood, and his flesh and blood were a mess. It had only been a day since they had seen each other, and the queen almost didn't recognize that the woman kneeling in front of her was Chang Liangyuan. Chang Liangyuan lived here like a year. As soon as she came in, she was flogged by Xiao Jinyu. When she saw the queen coming, she clung to her as if she had seen a life-saving straw. She was lying on the ground, her face and dignity were not as important as being alive. And, help me. The queen had never hated a person so much and wanted to kill the vicious woman in front of her with her own hands. You still have the nerve to call me aunt? I don't have a vicious niece like you. Chang Liangyuan climbed forward with difficulty with both hands. Every time she climbed, her wound would be pulled, causing severe pain. Aunt, I know I was wrong, help me, help me. The queen looked coldly at Chang Liangyuan, who was desperately crawling in front of her. There was no emotion in her eyes, but anger and hatred. My precious granddaughter was almost killed by this poisonous woman. How dare you ask me to save you? I wish I could kill you myself. Chang Liangyuan cried and said, Aunt, I did this because I was obsessed for a moment. Aunt, can you forgive me? The queen calmed down and said, when you were a child, I loved you very much. I often took you to stay in the palace and asked you to marry the prince so that you could become the crown prince. But what about you? Over and over again. I want to harm my grandson for the first time. It is a shame for the Chang family to have a legitimate daughter like you. Chang Liangyuan knew that the queen would not be soft-hearted to save her, so she could only rely on her father. His father was a general, and the emperor had to give her some mercy. And, I want to see my father. Please let me see my father. The queen sneered, you still want General Chang to come and save you? I still advise you to give up. Even if General Chang pleads for mercy, I will not let you go. Don't expect the emperor to give Changda a favor. The general's face will spare your life. Susu is the emperor's darling. You want to kill the emperor's darling, but you still expect the emperor to spare your life. The queen continued, let me tell you one more thing. General Chang will not offend the imperial power just because of you. You should not do it at all. You should not attack Susu. You are simply seeking death. Chang Liangyuan's hopes were shattered one by one, and she died unwillingly, but no one came to save her. The crown prince and crown princess will be back today. The queen turned and left after saying a few words. When Chang Liangyuan heard that the prince was coming back today, she felt even more regretful. If she had not pushed Susu into the relationship, she could have seen the prince, and maybe she would still have a chance to sleep with him. But now, nothing is possible. At this time, on the official road, Feng Guiu slept all the way, but she was particularly excited now. She opened the curtain and looked outside. She could see the city wall in the distance, which meant that she was about to enter the city. It's been too long since I left the palace, and I don't know what happened to the babies. She looked away and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Do you think the babies will still recognize us after we go back? Xiao Jinyan calculated the time. When he left, the babies were not even 2 years old. When Xiaoju left, the babies had not yet arrived for their second birthday. Now they are already 2.5 years old. It's been so long, it's normal to forget. It's hard to say. Feng Guiu said with some worry, when we go back, will they hide from us? June mocking comforted her, you are their mother. Even if we don't know each other when we first come back, we will become very close to you after getting along for one day. Feng Guiu became a mother for the first time, and had never experienced being separated from her baby for so long. When her father said this, she couldn't help but look forward to it. Really? June mocking nodded, well, blood is thicker than water, they will kiss you. Feng Guiu felt a little relieved, Daddy is right. The babies are so cute and smart. They will definitely guess that I am their mother-in-law, so they will not stop being close to me. Xiao Jinyan reminded, we are about to enter the city. Feng Guiu was extremely excited, I'm finally entering the city, my darlings, I'm back. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaoju's excited look. In fact, he was also very excited. He hadn't seen the two babies for a long time. He didn't know how much they had grown and whether their little faces had changed. Qin Xiao used the token, so he entered the city unimpeded. When we enter the city, the speed slows down. Feng Guiu was eager to return home, but the smell of cakes and pastries on the street drifted in through the cracks in the curtains, arousing her greed. In order to travel, they could be said to have traveled day and night. Sometimes when they were tired, they would find an inn to rest. She opened the curtain and took a few glances, and saw her favorite shortbread and meatloaf. So greedy. She retracted her gaze and looked at Xiao Jinyan, stretched out her hand and tugged on his sleeves, buy some cakes to take back to Dao Tao and Susu. Susu is a snack foodie. We didn't bring them any small gifts or local specialties when we came back, they will definitely be disappointed. Xiao Jinyan could tell at a glance that Xiaoju was greedy. Just like when he was a child, he could always find excuses for his greed. Good. Xiao Jinyan opened the curtain and said to Qin Xiao, go buy some meat pies and shortbread cookies. I obey. After Qin Xiao stopped the carriage, he got out of the carriage neatly. He bought some more and bought a separate portion by the way. Maybe he hadn't seen Changzi for a long time, so he brought her some food. When Qin Xiao came back, he handed the oil paper bag in. Xiao Jinyan took it and gave it to Xiaju directly. You should eat some to fill your stomach first. Feng Guiu was already greedy, and it suited her perfectly. Good. She opened the oil paper package and smelled the aroma. It was a familiar aroma. She hadn't eaten it for a long time, but just smelling the aroma made her mouth water. She smiled and picked up a piece of meat pie and handed it to her father. Dad, eat the meat pie quickly. It's delicious. Jun Mocking couldn't refuse his daughter's feeding. Okay, she picked up the meatloaf in her daughter's hand with her slender fingers, brought it to her lips and took a bite. The meatloaf was very fragrant just out of the pan. She picked up another piece and handed it to Yesuhan's hand. Third brother, you can try a piece too. Okay, Yesuhan nodded without thinking. He picked up her meatloaf and brought it to his lips and took a bite. As soon as he tasted the taste, he felt a wave of nausea. He forced himself to swallow the meatloaf into his stomach. However, his stomach was still churning violently, as if he had been stimulated. Feng Guiu noticed something was wrong with Yesuhan, and asked worriedly, Third brother, what's wrong with you? Yesuhan shook his head. It's okay, maybe it's because of the cold. This wasn't the first time he had such a reaction. He always had this feeling of nausea whenever he ate meat. So he hasn't eaten meat for a long time. But now that I'm eating meat, my nausea is even stronger than before, and I have to vomit it out to feel better. Feng Guiu saw that his face was pale and felt a little worried. I'll check your pulse. Yesuhan nodded. Okay. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, rolled up his sleeves, and exposed one wrist. Feng Guiu put 2 fingers on the pulse and began to diagnose it. Xiao Jinyan's face was filled with anger. Even if there was a reason, he couldn't accept his wife diagnosing the pulse of her love rival. What's the difference between touching her hand? Feng Guiu exclaimed, your pulse is so strange. There is nothing wrong with your stomach, but your pulse tells me that you are physically sick. Yesuhan asked doubtfully, what's the disease? Feng Guiu said, cold poison. Yesuhan asked again, why is there cold poison? Feng Guiu asked, do you often stay in extremely cold places? Because only if you often stay in extremely cold places, the cold air will stay in the body and accumulate over time to form cold poison. Yesuhan shook his head, I didn't. Feng Guiu's eyes were full of doubts, what's going on? Yesuhan smiled and said, don't worry, just give me a good check when you get to the palace. Xiao Jinyan. Push even further. Okay, Feng Guiu picked up a piece of meat pie and was about to put it into his mouth. When he realized that Xiao Jinyan hadn't had it yet, he hurriedly handed the meat pie in his hand to him. Husband, you can eat a piece too. Xiao Jinyan snorted inwardly, finally remembering that you still have a husband. He took the meatloaf from her hand, put it to his lips and took a bite. When he saw Yesuhan holding the meatloaf, he suddenly felt that the taste of the meatloaf in his mouth had changed. Feng Guiu picked up a piece of meat pie and eagerly put it into her mouth and took a big bite. The familiar taste made her feel extremely satisfied. After the carriage entered the palace gate, Feng Guiu opened the curtain again and looked outside. After spending several years in the palace, she felt like she was home. The carriage drove all the way to the East Palace, and there was no time to see the Emperor first. The carriage stopped steadily at the entrance of the East Palace. When Susu saw the carriage, she stood up from the threshold excitedly, walked down with her short legs, and stared at the carriage curiously. The moment Susu stood up, Dabai immediately stood up and followed behind Susu. Feng Guiu was the first to jump out of the carriage. He was about to go in and give the babies a surprise. However, as soon as he got off the carriage, he saw a small figure suddenly showing a small head from the other side. He opened his eyes curiously. Stare at her. She didn't have a surprise from her daughter, but her daughter gave her a surprise. Feng Wu excitedly opened his arms towards Susu. Susu, mommy is back, come and give her a hug. Susu stared at Feng Wu for a while, feeling that she was a little different from the mom she saw last time. Are you mommy? Feng Wu nodded vigorously. Of course, don't Susu know mommy? Susu walked up to her with two short legs, staring at Feng Wu with her big dark eyes. Then you know how to call me baby. Good night Spicy. Please give me monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 607. Feng Wu's eyebrows curved. Of course, baby, does the mother want to hold it? Susu thought for a while with her fingers interlocked, and then nodded. You can hold the baby first. The babyish voice melted Feng Wu's heart. Without waiting for Feng Wu to hold Susu, Susu opened her arms and took the initiative to throw herself into her arms, and then hugged her neck tightly. Feng Wu wanted to pick her up, but she underestimated Susu's weight and failed to pick her up. Baby, take good care of it? Susu asked again, then will the mother kiss the baby? Of course Feng Wu didn't think about it and kissed Susu's pink cheeks, one on the left and one on the right. After Susu identified that it was the mother, she happily kissed Feng Wu's cheeks twice. You are the mother, the previous mothers didn't want the baby. Susu still remembered that the previous mother threw her on the street and didn't want her anymore. Feng Wu thought that Susu said that she didn't want her anymore because she had left the palace for so long. She felt distressed and a little guilty. Baby, mommy won't abandon you. Mommy won't leave you again in the future. Susu half believed and half doubted. Really? Feng Wu nodded vigorously. Of course it's true. Mommy will never leave you again. Xiao Jinyan and Jun Mocking got off the car one after another and came behind Feng Wu. Xiao Jinyan saw his daughter. She didn't change much from when they separated. It can be clearly seen that Susu has grown a lot taller, her hair has grown longer, and she has two small sideburns. He took a step forward with some excitement. Susu, do you still remember your father? Susu looked up at Xiao Jinyan in doubt. She had been separated for too long and couldn't remember what her father looked like. Are you the father? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Of course. Susu asked the question as if it was a secret code. Then can you call me baby? Xiao Jinyan said without hesitation. Yes, baby, will you let father hold me? Susu continued to ask, then can you kiss the baby? Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed Susu on the cheek. Susu pouted and said seriously, no, no, kiss this side too. Xiao Jinyan smiled and kissed Susu on the left cheek. Is this okay? Susu then happily opened her arms. Father, hold the baby. Xiao Jinyan held Susu in his arms and found that Susu had not only grown taller, but also gained a lot of weight. The moment Jun Mocking saw Susu, he felt like he saw Xiaju when he was a child. His little face was chubby and pink, his big eyes were black and bright, and his baby voice was particularly lovable. Susu, do you want Grandpa to hug you? Susu raised her chin. You can't fool me. Jun Mocking was stunned for a moment, and said, you can also ask me questions. Susu hugged her father's neck tightly and said, I don't have a grandpa, I won't ask. Susu only remembers her father and mother, so she would think that the grandpa who suddenly appeared was a liar. She would not ask these questions to a liar, and she would not believe it even if the answer was correct. Jun Mocking was a nanny, so he immediately understood what Susu meant. You didn't have a grandpa before, but now you have one. Grandpa will spoil you like your mom and buy you lots of delicious food. Don't you want a grandpa? Susu was moved after hearing this. What do you mean by grandpa? June mocking explained patiently, Grandpa is your mom's father, just like your father is your father, understand? Susu blinked her big beautiful eyes twice, stared at her father for a long time, and then looked at her mom. Mom, is he right? Feng Guiyu nodded vigorously, yes, he is mom's father and your grandpa. One more person will love you, okay? Susu said happily, okay. June mocking wanted to hug Susu. When Xiaju was a child, he hugged her a lot in a blink of an eye. So many years have passed, and Xiaju has grown up and become a mother. Do you want Grandpa to hold her? Susu thought for a while, nodded hesitantly, then hold her for a while. Okay, hold her for a while. June mocking stretched out his arms and held Susu in his arms, feeling her weight, and said to Xiaju, Susu is very similar to you. She was also this heavy when she was this big, and she ate a lot at every meal. Susu really likes to eat. Feng Guiyu remembered the crispy meat pie she bought on the road. She took it out, opened the oil paper package and handed it to Susu. Susu, do you want to eat a pie? Yes. Susu stretched her neck to look into the oil paper package, stretched out her little hand to pick up a piece and put it into her mouth and took a bite. Good. Yes. Suhan looked at Susu. This was the first time he saw Susu. She looked very much like Xiaju when he was a child, even the way she ate was so similar. Feng Guiyu thought of his son, and Dao Tao must be studying in the study room, just like His Highness, she loves to study. Back in the palace, Feng Guiyu changed the name, Xiao Jinyan was the prince after all. June mocking said, then take a look. When he walked into the Hehuan palace, he saw Dabai at the door, looking at the group of people in front of him with his huge head raised. Feng Guiyu rubbed Dabai's head and was a little surprised, Dabai has grown so big. Susu witnessed Dabai grow from a little tiger cub to a big tiger. She waved her hands excitedly, wow, it's grown so tall. June mocking looked at the white tiger, whose fur was snow white, even whiter than the Tigan beast. The snow white fur seemed to be coated with a layer of silver frost. This was a very rare silver white tiger. Is this Susu's pet? Feng Guiyu nodded, yes, it has been playing with Susu and the others since it was 1 month old. It has been playing with them until now, and it always follows Susu's buttocks. June mocking said, silver white tigers understand human nature. Susu is good to raise and can protect herself. Feng Guiyu said, I think so too, so I let them cultivate their feelings together since they were young. When she saw Dabai, she felt that it was different from ordinary white tigers, so she insisted on raising it when she learned that it became an orphan. Feng Guiyu couldn't help asking, Dad, isn't it also a spiritual beast? June mocking nodded, yes, it's the same as the tiger-lion beast. Feng Guiyu. Isn't it rare in 100 years? There are 3 in her family. This made her question the rare spiritual beast. The group entered the Hehuan hall and then went to the study. At this time, Dao Tao was practicing calligraphy. After learning for more than half a year, she made great progress. Xiao Jinyan walked in first. Song Qing saw the prince and the princess who had been away from the palace for a long time, and stepped forward to salute, may the prince be well and the princess be well. Xiao Jinyan, get up. Song Qing then stood up and stepped aside. Chu Lingfeng also put down his pen and stepped forward to salute, I pay my respects to the prince and the princess. Xiao Jinyan looked at the young man in front of him and felt unfamiliar, who are you? Chu Lingfeng said, I am the son of King Chu Nan, Chu Lingfeng. Feng Guiyu explained, Prince Chu was originally Yin'er's study partner. Because Yin'er was naughty and Susu liked Prince Chu, my father asked Prince Chu to be Dao Tao's study partner. Xiao Jinyan nodded, so that's how it is. After Dao Tao finished writing that word, she couldn't wait to put down her pen and ran over. He threw himself into Feng Guiyu's arms, Mother, you are finally back. Feng Guiyu was a little touched. The babies had not forgotten her. She looked at Dao Tao and found that she was thinner and taller than when she left. Compared with Susu's chubby little face, Dao Tao's cheeks were obviously not so fleshy. Dao Tao, why do you feel thinner? Dao Tao touched Feng Wu's face. Mother, you are thinner too. Feng Wu was even more moved. Dao Tao, you have grown up and become sensible. Feng Wu was still moved, and suddenly heard Dao Tao in her arms say in a baby voice, Mom, dear baby. Feng Wu. Dao Tao is still a child no matter how sensible she is. She smacked Dao Tao's cheeks twice. Dao Tao, your father is back too. Xiao Jinyan looked at his son. It had been too long since he last saw him. Dao Tao was really sensible. Dao Tao. Dao Tao raised her head and looked at Xiao Jin. She was the same age as Susu and had the same memory. She had a vague idea of her father, but she knew that there was a father. Listening to Chengxi's nagging every day, she couldn't forget it even if she wanted to. Father. Xiao Jinyan squatted down in front of Dao Tao and looked at his son. Although he looked exactly like Susu, he looked very much like him when he was a child when he was alone. Dao Tao is very smart. Dao Tao said, Father has been away for so long. Where has he been? My sister and I look a lot like you. Xiao Jinyan explained, Father and your mother have important things to do. Now they are back and will not be away for so long in the future. Susu took a bite of the meat pie and said, Kuakuo, we have a grandpa now. Dao Tao looked up at her sister and saw that her sister was being held by a stranger. Who is grandpa? Susu pointed at Jun Mocking who was holding her and said, he is grandpa. Feng Wu reminded, Dao Tao, call grandpa. Dao Tao called in a baby voice, grandpa. Jun Mocking looked at Dao Tao, who looked exactly like Susu. They were indeed twins. He squatted down with Susu in his arms and held Dao Tao in his arms. The weight immediately lightened. Dao Tao is lighter than Susu. Although Jun Mocking lamented that his daughter got married too early, he was still very happy to have grandchildren. Chu Lingfeng, who was standing aside, looked at the scene in front of him with nothing but envy in his eyes, because these were all things he didn't have. Xiao Jinyu rushed to the East Palace immediately after learning that the prince and the princess had returned. When he stepped into the study and saw a room full of people, he was stunned for a moment. Brother Prince, sister-in-law, you are finally back. Xiao Jinyu strode in and came to Xiao Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan thought of the time in the military camp before he lost his memory. His younger brother really grew up and had the ability to stand on his own. In fact, Xiao Jinyu was just protected too well. He was very smart and capable. You've impressed me this time. Xiao Jinyu was a little embarrassed. This is the first time that the prince has praised me like this. Xiao Jinyan said, you used to be idle and acted like a playboy all day long. How can I praise you? Can I praise you for being a playboy? And then continue to be a playboy? Xiao Jinyu said, there is the prince in the palace. It's good for me to be an idle prince, but if the prince gets into trouble, the younger brother will naturally not stand idly by. Xiao Jinyan was very pleased. I have always known. The reason why he came back from Nanzhao Kingdom and had a good relationship with his younger brother is here. His younger brother will not be afraid that he will take the position of the prince because he came back. He will not play tricks on his biological brother because of the position of the prince. He is the same. If he didn't know that his younger brother had no intention of the position of the prince, he would not go all out to fight for it. Yasuhan looked at Xiao Jinyan and Xiao Jinyu. The most precious thing in the royal family is the brotherhood. Xiao Jinyan has it, but he doesn't. Tao Liangyuan has always wanted to leave the palace, but she has delayed it until now because the prince and the princess have been coming back. When she heard the news that the princess had returned, she couldn't wait to come to the Hehuan palace. Seeing the princess, she excitedly took small steps over. Princess, you are finally back. Feng Wu looked Tao Liangyuan up and down. Sometimes she was a fleshy woman, but now she is almost a skinny beauty. Tao Liangyuan, you have lost a lot of weight. Tao Liangyuan has never lost weight, and she was surprised by her sudden weight loss. The princess is not here, I don't even have a place to eat, and I can't come often, for fear of being misunderstood. Ever since Chang Liangyuan brought the queen to arrest her once, she has been very cautious. When she was still the prince's concubine, she tried to come as little as possible to avoid trouble for Song Cheng. Feng Wu asked curiously, how is your relationship with Song Tanhua going? Tao Liangyuan shook her head helplessly, no progress. Now that the crown princess is back, I plan to leave the palace. Let's talk about it after I leave the palace. Feng Wu nodded in agreement. It would be a waste of youth to continue staying in the palace. Okay, Su Qingqing is getting married at the end of the year, so you should hurry up. Tao Liangyuan was a little surprised when she heard this. Su Qingqing is getting married. With whom? Feng Wu said, with my brother, Jun Wuxian. Tao Liangyuan looked puzzled, how did your brother become Jun Wuxian? Feng Wu explained the general reason for the matter. So, Su Qingqing will be my sister-in-law in the future. Tao Liangyuan exclaimed, it's amazing. I think so too. Feng Wu can be said to have gained a lot from leaving the palace this time. I'm going to find Su Qingqing when I leave the palace, and take a look at her fiancé by the way. Of course, my brother is very handsome. At this time, in the yard, Jun Mocking released the tiger lion beast. Dab, I thought he was the biggest in the palace, but a beast twice as big as him came, and he panicked for a while. Susu inherited Feng Wu's genes, so she was braver than ordinary children. When she saw the big hoo-hoo that suddenly appeared, she curiously went over and touched its thigh. The tiger lion beast trapped in the space seemed to have taken a long-distance bus, and it was still a little dizzy. When it saw Susu, it suddenly opened its eyes wide, as if it couldn't believe it. It slowly lay on the ground and stared at Susu with its two huge eyes without blinking. Susu had the smell of Xiaju on her body, and she was very similar to Xiaju, so she didn't reject her touch. Susu looked at Jun Mocking excitedly, Grandpa, Hoo-hoo is so big. The tiger lion beast was a little excited when she heard it, and she also called herself Hoo-hoo. Xiao Jinyu looked at Jun Mocking and asked Yesuhan beside him, who is he? At this time, Xiao Jinyu didn't know that the other party was Xiao Jinyan's rival in love. Yesuhan didn't want to talk to Xiao Jinyu at first, but he found that Xiao Jinyu was a little different from Xiao Jinyan, so he replied lazily. He is Xiaju's father, the state master of Nanzhao Kingdom. Good night. Please vote for the monthly ticket and recommendation ticket. If you haven't added the new book to the bookshelf yet, please add it to the bookshelf. I will post it on the 20th. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 608. Oh, it turns out to be the national teacher of Nanzhao. Xiao Jinyu paused, turned his head and looked at Yesuhan. His tone was a little unbelievable. He is the national teacher of Nanzhao. Yesuhan took in his surprised expression. No matter who heard the national teacher of Nanzhao, they would be surprised. He chuckled, it's true. Xiao Jinyu looked at Jun Mocking again, and clicked his tongue in his heart, such a young national teacher. I thought the national teacher was a 50-year-old man, but I didn't expect him to be so young. He must have become an immortal, right? He has the ability to live forever. I didn't expect that one day I could see the national teacher so close. I don't know if he will accept disciples. Yesuhan. It's no wonder Xiao Jinyu said this. The national teacher of Nanzhao has long been rumored to be very mysterious. In their eyes, the national teacher has achieved the right result. This is also the reason why Nanzhao has always been the strongest country. Xiao Jinyu realized a serious problem belatedly. That's not right. The imperial master has achieved enlightenment, So where did the child come from? Who is Xiaju? Yesuhan discovered that Xiao Jinyu and Xiao Jinyan were not only different, but completely different. He kindly reminded, what does Susu call the national master? Xiao Jinyu answered quickly, Grandpa. After saying that, he was stunned, and then showed an unbelievable look, he is my sister-in-law's father? My sister-in-law's father is the national master. No, isn't my sister-in-law the daughter of the Shen family? How did she become the daughter of the national master? Xiao Jinyu looked at Yesuhan, and suddenly realized, could it be that she is a goddaughter? Yesuhan. Seeing that Yesuhan was silent and not angry, Xiao Jinyu continued to sigh, sister-in-law is so powerful, she even managed the national master. No wonder the prince brother fell into her hands. Yesuhan. Xiao Jinyu saw the beast that suddenly appeared, and clicked his tongue twice, the national master is so powerful, he knows magic, such a big tiger has turned out, and Susu is also very powerful, daring to go up and touch it? Yesuhan. Xiao Jinyu looked Yesuhan up and down, you look familiar to me, who are you? Yesuhan, who was silent for a long time, said faintly, the third prince of Nanzao Kingdom. Why didn't I hear that someone from Nanzao Kingdom was coming? Xiao Jinyu suddenly reacted, you came in with the prince brother. The prince brother used to be a hostage in Nanzao Kingdom. You should be good friends, right? Yesuhan's voice was a little cold, who is good friends with him? Xiao Jinyu was a little confused, isn't it? Yesuhan looked at Xiao Jinyu with a smile, would you be good friends with your love rival? Of course not, whoever covets my wife, I will not be polite. Xiao Jinyu was stunned after saying that. When he looked at Yesuhan, his eyes changed immediately, do you like my sister-in-law? Xiaoju and I have been childhood sweethearts, and Xiao Jinyan stole her love. Yesuhan gritted his teeth and said. Xiao Jinyu was about to say something, but she felt something was wrong, how could my sister-in-law and you be childhood sweethearts? Did you make a mistake? Yesuhan had the rare patience to tell Xiaoju's life story, and also talked about Xiao Jinyan's love. After listening to it, Xiao Jinyu felt like he was listening to a storyteller, because it was too coincidental and too magical. So that's it? He patted Yesuhan on the shoulder, my sister-in-law and the prince both have 2 children, maybe the second child will be implemented soon, you should think more positively. Yesuhan. Xiao Jinyan came back and went straight to the East Palace, so the emperor got the news a little slower, because he was dealing with government affairs, and did not go to the East Palace immediately, or let the prince come to see him. No one in the palace knew that in addition to the prince and the princess, there were also the national teacher and the third prince of Nanzao. When Xiao Jinyu came to the imperial study, the emperor was still busy. Xiao Jinyu stepped forward to greet him, Father, the prince is here. I just learned about it. I will summon him when I am done with my work. The emperor said, have you been there? Of course, I came to the imperial study because I have been there. Xiao Jinyu came to the dragon case and looked at the pile of memorials on the table. He sighed in his heart. Fortunately, he did not have to be the emperor, otherwise he would be the one working overtime to review the memorials in the near future. The emperor asked, Susu should be very happy to see father and mother, right? Very happy, Xiao Jinyu said mysteriously, Father, I have something very, very important to tell you. The emperor chuckled, what important thing can you have? Father, what do you mean by this? I came here to tell you. If you don't want to listen, I will leave. Xiao Jinyu said as if he was about to leave, but was stopped by the emperor, you come back to me, you are getting bolder and bolder. Can't I say it? I don't know whose temper you resemble. In fact, the emperor knew that yours temper was like the queen's. Xiao Jinyu snorted, if she doesn't look like my father, she looks like my mother. Who else can she look like? The emperor smiled and asked, tell me, what's the matter? Xiao Jinyu didn't keep it a secret. Father, the crown princess is the daughter of the imperial master. The emperor was stunned for a moment and looked up at his son. What did you say? Xiao Jinyu repeated again, the crown princess is the daughter of the imperial master of Nanzhao. The emperor asked in confusion, isn't the crown princess from the Shen family? How did she become the daughter of the imperial master? Xiao Jinyu repeated Yes Suhan's words, that's it, the crown princess is not from the Shen family. Unexpectedly, the crown princess is actually the daughter of the imperial preceptor. After the emperor said this, he laughed happily. Not just anyone can marry the imperial preceptor's daughter, but by some strange combination of circumstances, the crown prince married her. Who would be unhappy? Xiao Jinyu was not stupid. Of course his father was so happy because the status of the crown princess was much more noble than that of the princess. Father, the imperial master is in the East Palace now. The emperor's smile paused. You said the imperial master is here. Xiao Jinyu nodded, yes, the imperial master is here with us to see our two grandsons. The emperor heard this and said angrily, then why didn't you tell me earlier? I didn't go to greet the imperial master when he came. It's simply rude. Xiao Jinyu said, didn't my son come to tell you? You should have said it when you came in, the emperor said, putting down his ink pen, getting up and walking out of the imperial study. Xiao Jinyu shrugged, he had some merit. When the emperor came, Jun Mocking was sitting at the table drinking tea. He had nothing to do on weekdays, so he liked to drink tea, read books, and cultivate his mind and character. Susu Dao Tao has been playing with the tiger, lion, and beast. Chengzi was so excited today that she kept busy in the kitchen, trying to make a sumptuous lunch for the crown princess. Feng Wei came out of the back room and saw Dao Tao and Susu climbing on the tigress. How could they climb up with two short legs? Dabai was lying on the side with a depressed look on his face. As soon as she came over, she saw the emperor's chariot and stepped forward to salute, Father, may you be blessed and safe. The emperor smiled and said, get up quickly. I heard that the imperial master is here. Is it true? Jun Mocking came here with integrity, and the emperor would know about it sooner or later, so Feng Wei was not surprised. Father, my dad is sitting there drinking tea. I went over to pay a visit to the imperial master, the emperor said, and walked over. Feng Wei ordered, Xiao Gaizi, go make tea. Yes, Master. Xiao Gaizi quickly went to make tea. Feng Wei also walked over. When the emperor came over, he only saw a young man sitting at the table drinking tea. He was secretly shocked that the imperial master was so young and had a fairy-like temperament. He must be the imperial master. Master National Preceptor, I apologize for missing you from afar. Jun Mocking raised his head and looked over and saw the man wearing a dragon robe. Even if he didn't know him, he knew he was the Emperor of Daxia. The Emperor is serious. Sit down and have a cup of tea. The Emperor smiled and came to the table and sat down. When Susu and Dao Tao saw Grandpa Huan coming, they stopped crawling and ran over. Grandpa, Grandpa. Susu threw herself into the Emperor's arms. When she raised her head, her eyebrows curled up in a smile. Grandpa, I have a grandpa in my nest. Dao Tao pointed at Jun Mocking and said, Grandpa, he is our grandfather. The Emperor held Susu in his arms and said with a smile, Grandpa already knows. He looked at Dao Tao, reached out and rubbed Dao Tao's head. Grandpa comes to see you, are you happy? I'm happy. Dao Tao ran to Jun Mocking and reached out for a hug. Grandpa, give me a hug. Okay. Jun Mocking put down the teacup, bent down to pick up Dao Tao, and then looked at the Emperor. After the scene just now, it can be seen that the Emperor liked the two little guys very much, and he liked Susu even more. The Emperor said, I have just heard about the Crown Princess's life experience. If I know about it, I will definitely inform the Imperial Master in advance. Feng Wei came over with tea and placed it in front of the Emperor. Father, Please use the tea. Susu milks her milky voice and shouts, Mom, I'm sorry. Okay, Mommy will ask someone to prepare it. Feng Guiu smiled and turned to Xiao Gaizi, go and prepare some pastries. Here Xiao Gaizi left with small steps, and when she came back she had a plate of pastries on the table. Feng Guiu warned in a gentle voice, eat less, lunch is almost here. Mom, I know, I need to keep the meat in my belly. Susu happily picked up the pastries on the plate and turned around and handed them to the emperor. Grandpa. Thank you Susu. The emperor happily held the cake. Susu then put her hand into the plate again, picked up a piece of pastry and presented it to June mocking. This action caused most of her body to be on the table. Grandpa, too. Thank you Susu. June mocking also happily picked up the pastry from Susu's little hand. Susu took another piece for Guo Guo, and then took it for herself. During lunch, the queen also came. On the way, she learned about the crown princess's life experience from Xiao Jinyu, and was as surprised as the emperor. It seems that she has good taste, and the crown princess is different from ordinary people. She turns out to be the daughter of the imperial master, so no wonder she is so popular. When he stepped into the restaurant, he saw that the emperor was also there. He snorted in his heart and didn't ask her to come with him. With dignified and elegant steps, she came to the imperial preceptor to greet him and said, National Preceptor. June mocking raised his eyes and glanced at the queen. Although she had heard someone mention it before, this was the first time she had seen her. Like the emperor, she was well maintained despite her age. When the queen sat down, she kicked the emperor with her foot. The emperor lowered his eyes and glanced under the table. He didn't know why he made the queen angry. Why did he kick him as soon as he came up? The dining table was full of people. Xiao Jinyan brought food to Xiaju. Eat more, you have lost a lot of weight these days. Feng Guiu put some meat and fish into Xiao Jinyan's bowl. You should also eat more. You haven't had time to exercise during this period, and you have lost a lot of muscles. Fish can supplement protein and prevent muscle loss. Xiao Jinyan. He suddenly remembered the painting that Xiaju drew for him. In the painting, his texture lines were very smooth and were deliberately drawn very clearly. So he had muscles. But since the assassination, he has not had time to exercise, and his muscles have indeed lost a lot. It seems that he needs to exercise well. Yasuhan looked at the scene in front of him, and then looked at the vegetarian dishes in the bowl. He would vomit after eating a bite of meat. He didn't have much muscle on his body. He remembered that he had a lot of muscle on his body before. The emperor originally wanted to drink with the state master, but found that the state master didn't drink, so he had to give up. After lunch, Dao Tao and Susu went to the room for a nap. The emperor and the queen did it for a while, and then left. Xiao Jinyan had just come back and had a lot of things to do, so he went to work. At this time, Chengzi had just finished his work in the kitchen and saw Qin Xiao walk in. He hadn't seen him for a long time, and he was actually a little embarrassed. Qin Xiao took out a cake wrapped in oil paper from his arms and handed it to Chengzi, for you. Qin Xiao would bring her something every time he left the palace. She took the oil paper bag, looked up at Qin Xiao, and after a few glances, said, You have lost a lot of weight. Qin Xiao said, Most of the time I was on the road, so I lost a little weight. I stewed some soup, you drink some to replenish your body. Chengzi said, putting the oil paper bag on the table, took out a clean bowl from the cabinet, and filled a large bowl of chicken soup. Qin Xiao looked at the chicken soup in front of him, and then looked at Chengzi. After being apart for so long, the person he missed most outside was her. Chengzi, I want to ask you something. Chengzi smiled and said, Ask. Qin Xiao was straightforward, so he didn't beat around the bush. What do you think of me? Chengzi said, Very good, what's wrong? Qin Xiao said again, Then if I let the master arrange for us to get married, would you be willing? Chengzi's face flushed. She didn't expect Qin Xiao to be so straightforward and directly said to get married. Qin Xiao asked again, "Are you willing?" Chengzi was a little embarrassed, and nodded with her eyes slightly lowered. Qin Xiao was so excited to see that she agreed, "Then I will go and tell her after the master is done with these 2 days." Chengzi nodded shyly, "Yes." Qin Xiao happily raised the bowl and drank the chicken soup in big gulps. At night, Feng Wu lay in Xiao Jinyan's arms, a little drowsy, but someone's restless hands made her want to sleep but couldn't, but more awake. After more than a month without touching, Xiao Jinyan couldn't help it. Just after taking off Xiaoju's clothes, there was a knock at the door. "Mom, open the door." Xiao Jinyan knew it was Susu as soon as he heard the voice. He had no choice but to open the door and saw Susu hugging the pillow. "Susu, why are you here?" Susu raised her little face and said in a baby voice, "I want to sleep with mommy." After being separated for too long, Xiao Jinyan couldn't bear to refuse his daughter's request, so he carried her to bed. As soon as Susu got into bed, she hugged Feng Wu's neck and said, "Mom, why didn't you want to stay in bed last time? Good night, please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading." Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 609. Children have very good memories. The last time they were left behind, Susu felt extremely wronged, so she remembers it very clearly. As soon as Feng Wu closed her clothes, she saw Xiao Jinyan carrying Susu to the bed. When Susu was sleeping alone in the past, she would occasionally run over to her. This was probably the child's natural dependence on his mother. In addition, after being separated for too long, Susu felt insecure, so she came over holding a pillow on the first night when she came back. She held Susu in her arms, her body was warm and fleshy, and it was very comfortable to hold. "Mom doesn't want you, you are mom's baby." Susu pouted and said, "Niu, Wo saw it with his own eyes, and I made Wo lose it." Feng Wu felt even more distressed when he heard this. He had been away for too long this time, and Susu was even frightened. Xiao Jinyan heard her daughter's words as soon as she went to bed, which also shows that her daughter really misses her mother and concubine, which is why she is so insecure. "Susu, your concubine left the palace to find her father. Didn't you see that your concubine and your father are both back?" Susu turned to look at Xiao Jinyan, frowning and thinking for a while, "Did mommy lose her nest, twice?" Feng Wu and Xiao Jinyan looked at each other. She felt that her daughter had probably misunderstood her. No wonder she felt so insecure. "Susu, mom didn't abandon you twice. Mom went to find your father this time, otherwise she wouldn't have left you." "Yes, mommy said it was not a nest, mommy, and then she abandoned her nest and ran away," Susu said angrily. Feng Wu feels that she has been away for too long this time. Her daughter loves her very deeply, so it won't leave a shadow in her heart, right? She sat up, held her baby daughter in her arms, and said in a very gentle voice, "Baby, are you mistaken? I never said I wasn't your mother." Susu said with a serious face, "Mom is not good, lying is not a good boy." Feng Wu looked at Xiao Jinyan helplessly, "What should I do? Is there something wrong with my daughter?" Xiao Jinyan also felt that what his daughter said was a bit strange. He looked at his daughter and asked tentatively, "Susu, when did your mother-in-law not want you?" "It's just." Susu frowned and thought for a while. It was Grandpa who took Wo to see the building. Wo saw Mom, Kuo, Mom said it wasn't Wo, Mom, and she didn't kiss Wo. Feng Wu looked confused. Xiao Jinyan said, "It should be that when we were away, my father took Susu to play. Maybe it was because he recognized the wrong person." Susu added, "That mommy is a little different from the mommy now." Feng Wu asked, "What's the difference?" Susu said in a sweet voice, the clothes that mom is wearing are not the color of flowers. In Susu's eyes, pink is the color of flowers, which is very beautiful. She grabbed Xiao Jinyan again and said, "It's the same as my father's clothes." Xiao Jinyan came back today, wearing a black brocade dress with dark patterns and narrow sleeves. Is it black? Feng Wu was now sure, you are right, my daughter most likely regards another woman as her mother. She looked down at her daughter and explained, baby, that's not mom. Susu looked puzzled, the mud guys look alike. Feng Wu was a little surprised, is it similar? Susu nodded vigorously, it's very similar. With so many people in this world, it is inevitable that they all look alike. Just being bumped into by Susu was a coincidence. She lowered her head and gave her baby daughter a chip on her forehead, baby, that's not the mother. She just looks like her, so she said she's not the baby's mother. Do you understand now? Susu stared at Feng Wu as if she didn't understand, why not mom? The children have many doubts. As a mother, Feng Wu must answer them patiently and carefully. Just like you and my brother, you look alike, but you are two people instead of one. Do you understand now? Susu nodded, Wo knows, mom and she are just like Wo and Guo Guo. Just when Feng Wu breathed a sigh of relief, he heard Susu question again. Is mommy my sister? Or my elder sister? Feng Wu looked at Susu and looked at him curiously, Does this mean that she and that woman are also twins? She and I just look alike, we are not sisters. Xiao Jinyan was afraid that her daughter would continue to ask questions, so she reminded her gently, Susu, it's very late, it's time to go to bed. Susu yawned, got up and kissed Feng Wu's cheek, then hugged Xiao Jinyan's face and gave her a chip before lying down on the bed again. It's time to sleep, Susu said and closed her eyes obediently. Feng Wu patted her daughter's chest gently. The little girl slept very well. She fell asleep within a short while after closing her eyes. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan. Jinyan, do you think that woman looks so much like me that my daughter would admit she was her mother? Xiao Jinyan said, my daughter is young and has not seen you for so long, so her memory will definitely be a little blurry. When she sees a woman who looks very similar to you, she will mistake her for her mother-in-law. This is normal. That's right. It's normal for a daughter to admit her mistake after not seeing her for so long. Feng Wu yawned, go to sleep. Xiao Jinyan couldn't sleep. He glanced at his daughter and thought that he wouldn't be able to do it tonight. The next day, Xiao Jinyan woke up first and glanced sideways. His daughter and Xiaju were both fast asleep. He looked away, got up gently, and changed clothes. After getting dressed, he stood by the bed and looked at the sleeping mother and daughter, his eyes full of tenderness. The mother and daughter even sleep in the same position, one holding the feet of the quilt and the other holding a small soft pillow. After watching for a while, he turned around and walked out. When Susu woke up, she found that her father was missing. She raised her head and looked at Feng Wu. She stood up on the bed with her little hands and stared at Feng Wu with her big dark eyes unblinking. Finally, she climbed on top of Feng Wu, held Feng Wu's face with her two little fleshy hands, and then gave her a squeak on the cheek. Feng Wu was sleeping soundly, but suddenly she felt like she couldn't breathe, as if she was being pressed tightly by something, and even though she was being pressed, he was licking her. A few seconds later, Feng Wu suddenly woke up from her dream and saw Susu staring at her with a smile. Mom, I woke up from a kiss in bed. Feng Wu actually wanted to say, can you not disturb her sleep? After finally returning to the palace, she should sleep until she wakes up naturally. She will never stand if she can sit, and never sit if she can lie down. But the baby is so cute, how could she be willing to let her down? Well, I woke up with a kiss from the baby. Susu sat up and took Feng Wu's arm. Mom, get up. Feng Wu turned his head and glanced out the window. At this time, he didn't know what time it was. If her daughter wants her to get up, then get up. At the worst, she can have something to eat and continue sleeping on the couch, who can stay a while longer. Okay, get up. After taking some time, Fenghui got up and got dressed with Susu. After finishing dressing, Fenghui took her daughter's hand and walked out. As soon as she walked out, Susu saw the tiger and lion in the yard, so she let go of her numb hand and ran towards the tiger and lion with her two short legs. Past. Dabai stood up suddenly, thinking that Susu was coming to find him, but he saw Susu running in front of the tiger-lion beast, and it snorted. Tigress didn't sleep well the first night it came to a strange place. If it hadn't been able to smell Xiaoju, it wouldn't have been lying here so peacefully. Susu came to the tiger-lion beast. The tiger-lion beast lying down could be at the same level as Susu's chest. She stared at the big black nose of the tiger-lion beast for a while, then stretched out her little finger and poked it. It was a bit hard. She ran to Dabai again and said, "Hoo-hoo." Dabai's disappointed expression just now disappeared immediately, and he looked at Susu with wide eyes. Susu also stretched out her finger and poked Dabai's nose. It was a little softer than the nose of Tigress. Susu found it funny and laughed out loud. She turned around and saw Swichuan sleeping on the chair, and ran to Swichuan with a smile. A pair of big eyes stared curiously at Shuetuan's small nose. He carefully reached out his hand and poked the small nose. He found that it was soft and immediately laughed out, "It's so small." Fenghui saw it and couldn't help laughing. A child's happiness is so simple. June Mocking came over and happened to see the scene. "You were like this when you were a child." Fenghui raised her head to look at her father and said with a smile, "Was I so naughty when I was a child?" June Mocking spit out 4 words, "Half a catty." Fenghui watched Susu crawling on Dabai, and then asked, "Then when I was a child, did I ever displease my father?" June Mocking said, "Although you are naughty, you are very sensible. You are not unreasonable. When you were as old as Susu, you were very clingy to me." Because his mother was not around since he was young, he took care of Xiaoju alone. Xian'er was much older than Xiaoju and was very busy studying every day. There were no pets at that time and she was the only one to play with. It felt so lonely. So when he was 3 years old, in order to find a playmate for Susu, he took Susu to live with the queen. Fenghui smiled and said, "Because I didn't have a mother when I was a child, I only had a father. Who else would you stick to if you didn't stick with me? But that also means that I like Dad very much. It was my mistake not to have my mother by my side to accompany you." June Mocking sighed unnoticeably. Fenghui stared at her father for a long time. It was hard to imagine how her father could survive the past 20 years alone after her mother left. "Didn't Daddy think about going to Mommy?" June Mocking was a little helpless. "Of course I looked for it, but I couldn't find it." He also did fortune telling, but he couldn't predict her fortune. Fenghui thought about it. Her mother suddenly disappeared. How could her father not look for her? Dad is so powerful, but he hasn't been found yet. Could it be that? She didn't dare to continue thinking about it. Xiao Jinyan only learned today that Chang Liangyuan almost killed Susu, and immediately went to Tianlao with anger. When Xiao Jinyan saw Chang Liangyuan, he could no longer recognize her. The white prison clothes on her body had been stained with blood, and her waist-length hair was messy and had lost its luster, like straw. Messy hair covers most of her face. The jailer reminded, "The crown prince is here, why don't you quickly pay homage to his royal highness?" When Chang Liangyuan heard that the person coming was the prince, she raised her head tremblingly, and was stunned for a long time when she saw the prince, who was still as handsome as ever. The desire to survive made her use all her strength to support her thin body. It had only been 4 days since she had been in Tianlao, and Chang Liangyuan had already lost her shape. "Your Highness, for the sake of past kindness, please spare me, please." Xiao Jinyan's voice was as cold as ice. Spare you? Susu almost died because of you, but you still have the nerve to beg me for mercy? A woman with such a vicious mind like you should have died long ago. It is already a great favor for me to tolerate you until now. Chang Liangyuan was stunned for a long time after hearing this. She should have thought that Xiao Jinyan would not save her, let alone spare her. Xiao Jinyan, I am the legitimate daughter of General Chang Da. You have never treated me sincerely since you entered the East Palace. You are still a virgin after all these years in the palace. Chang Liangyuan said this, pointing at Xiao Jinyan angrily and asked, do you dare to say that you will not owe me anything? Xiao Jinyan said coldly, it is your own wish to enter the palace. This palace has never asked you to enter the palace, nor has it promised you. If you keep your duty, this palace can still let you enjoy your old age, but you are as vicious as a snake and have killed people several times. What qualifications do you have to blame? But, I am also your woman when I entered the East Palace, but I can't get any pity from you. Why can Shen Shuwei get your favor? And gave birth to 2 children? In terms of family background, Shen Shuwei can't compare with me. In terms of piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting, she is still not as good as me. Why can she become the crown princess? Chang Liangyuan almost roared at the end. Her face was ferocious, and she didn't have the slightest bit of dignity and elegance in the past. Xiao Jinyan said, she is the daughter of the national teacher, Feng Wu, the Juyo princess personally appointed by the emperor of Nanzhao, but this identity is far beyond your reach. Chang Liangyuan was stunned when he heard this. Who hasn't heard about the national teacher of Nanzhao? That person is a person like a fairy. The rulers of all countries are respectful to the master. She retorted, this is impossible. How could she be the daughter of the master? Whether you believe it or not, it can't change the facts. Xiao Jinyan suddenly ordered, Chang Liangyuan deliberately murdered the emperor's grandson. The crime is unforgivable. She will be executed tonight. Xiao Jinyan, you are ruthless and ungrateful. Chang Liangyuan just cursed loudly, and was covered by the jailer beside her to avoid offending His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Xiao Jinyan glanced at Chang Liangyuan coldly, it's too easy for you to die. After saying this, he walked out of the prison. Xiao Jinyan just returned to the East Palace and saw Eunuch Li holding a pile of memorials. Eunuch Li was also familiar with the place and said with a smile, Your Highness, these are all sent by the Emperor. Lu Ziwei stepped forward a few steps and took the memorials from Eunuch Li. Your Highness, I will go back to report. Eunuch Li left with a smile. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the memorial in Lu 11's hand. His father was really impatient. Send it to the study. Yes, Lu 11 went to the study with the memorial. In the yard, June Mocking was drinking tea and looking at Susu. She was playing on Dabai at the moment. Suddenly she got off Dabai and trotted to June Mocking. Susu, are you thirsty? Susu nodded, I want to drink water. June Mocking picked up the teacup and handed it to Susu's mouth, watching her 2 little hands holding the teacup tightly, and then drinking water in small sips. After drinking the water, June Mocking took the teacup and put it back on the table. Susu took June Mocking's hand, her little face full of curiosity. Grandpa, does mommy have a sister? Like me and Kyokuo. Good night. Another new book promotion. The fake daughter only wants to be a salted fish and then gets spoiled. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 610. June Mocking held Susu up and sat her on his lap. He looked at the little girl's dark eyes full of doubts and said softly, Susu, your mother has no sisters. Susu's doubts deepened after hearing this. She thought for a while and continued, could it be that Grandpa lost Mom's sister? So there are no sisters. June mocking laughed in his heart. The thoughts in children's heads are really interesting. Just like Xiaju when he was a child, he always asks some strange questions. Why would Susu think so? How could Grandpa lose his daughter? Grandpa only has your mother as a daughter, do you know? Susu nodded as if she understood. Then why does Mom look the same as others? Just like Wo and Kyokuo. It was June Mocking's turn to be confused. Susu, who did you see who looks like Mom? I don't know either. I thought it was Mom, but she didn't kiss me or call me baby. After Susu knew it was not Mom, there was no grievance in her voice. June Mocking had never seen a woman who looked very similar to Xiaju, except for Xiaju's mother, so he couldn't help but look forward to it. Where did you see her? On the street, where you buy fruit. Susu loved eating fruit the most, so she remembered it very clearly. Although Xiaju didn't specify which street it was, June Mocking guessed that it was Chang'an Street, the most prosperous and lively street in the capital. Dao Tao couldn't wait to put down her pen after finishing her morning class, and trotted out of the study. As soon as she ran to the door, she was picked up by Xiao Jinyu. Dao Tao, why are you running so fast? Dao Tao saw that it was Uncle Wang, and said with a smile, Uncle Wang, I'm going to play with Grandpa. Xiao Jinyu's eyes turned when he heard it, and he asked with a smile, Dao Tao, do you know how powerful your grandpa is? Dao Tao shook her head, I don't know. Xiao Jinyu said mysteriously, your grandpa is the national teacher, his martial arts are super powerful, much more powerful than your father, and your grandpa can tell fortunes, which is also very powerful. Dao Tao opened her eyes wide when she heard it. During this period, she had heard Xiao Jinyu talk about how powerful his father was, how powerful his Qinggong was, how powerful his wisdom was. Can it fly? Of course it can fly. Xiao Jinyu pointed to the distance from the palace wall in front of him to the opposite palace wall and said, your father can fly from here to there, and your grandpa. He pointed to the palace wall in front of him to the opposite pavilion and said, he can fly from here to there. Susu is very smart. After looking at Xiao Jinyu's strokes, she immediately understood that Grandpa is much more powerful than father. Grandpa is so powerful. Xiao Jinyu smiled and coaxed, do you want to be as powerful as your grandpa? Dao Tao nodded vigorously, yes. Xiao Jinyu found that Dao Tao was very sensible and a child who loved to learn. Then you can ask your grandpa to teach you martial arts, and then you can be as powerful as your grandpa. Then he leaned close to Dao Tao's ear and said, by the way, learn the fortune-telling skills as well. Then, besides your grandpa, you will be the most powerful. Dao Tao hesitated, will grandpa teach me? Xiao Jinyu said very affirmatively, of course, you are your grandpa's precious grandson. As the saying goes, good things should not flow to outsiders. Such a powerful martial arts will definitely be willing to teach you. Don't underestimate Dao Tao's young age. She has high aspirations. Since she can be as powerful as her grandfather, she must try her best to catch up and become a powerful person. In this way, she can protect her mother and sister. Then I will find my grandfather and let him teach me. Xiao Jinyu put Dao Tao down and said with a smile, go. Goodbye, little uncle. Dao Tao waved and ran towards the Hehuan palace. Xiao Jinyu looked at Dao Tao's enthusiasm and laughed twice. It would be a pity not to become a disciple of such a powerful grandfather. When Xiao Jinyan came back, he saw Xiao Jinyu standing at the door and grinning, what are you laughing at? Xiao Jinyu smiled and said, brother prince, I asked Dao Tao to find the national teacher to become a disciple with such good genes and such a powerful grandfather, it would be a pity not to learn. Xiao Jinyan also agreed with Xiao Jinyu's idea. It would be best if she could learn. With powerful martial arts, she could also protect herself and protect the people she wanted to protect. Dao Tao is not even 3 years old yet, it's a bit early to learn martial arts. Xiao Jinyu said, It's not far from 3 years old. Let's talk about it first. You can start learning when you are 3 years old. Xiao Jinyan nodded. It depends on the arrangement of the national teacher. Xiao Jinyu asked, by the way, Prince brother, have you recovered your previous memory? Xiao Jinyan nodded. Yes, when I was in Nanzhao Kingdom, the national teacher helped me recover. When I came back yesterday, there were too many things to do, and Xiao Jinyu was too curious to ask, so today I saw the prince brother was free and wanted to ask. Sister-in-law is the daughter of the national teacher, so the prince brother has known her for a long time. Yes, this palace and Xiaju are childhood sweethearts. When she was a child, she was kidnapped by her enemies and lost her memory. By chance, she became the concubine of the Shen family. Xiao Jinyan did not tell Xiaju about the time travel. After all, it was too fantasy and not suitable for too many people to know. For the first time, Xiao Jinyu felt that fate was a very magical thing. So that's it? Prince brother and sister-in-law are really destined by heaven. They can be together by chance. Xiao Jinyan did not comment. Come to the study with me. Xiao Jinyu nodded, okay. Dao Tao ran to the yard quickly with his 2 short legs and threw himself into Jun Mocking's arms. Grandpa, I have finished my morning lessons. Jun Mocking looked at Dao Tao and then at Susu, vividly displaying play and love for learning. On the way back, Jun Mocking heard Xiaju talk a lot about Dao Tao and Susu. When Dao Tao was 1 year old, she liked to draw with a pen. Other children are forced to study, but Dao Tao likes to study. Dao Tao, very powerful. Being praised by her grandpa, Dao Tao was not arrogant but just happy. Grandpa, I heard from Uncle Wang that Miu Miu is very, very powerful, isn't he? Jun Mocking nodded, yeah. Dao Tao's little face was full of seriousness. Wo must also become a powerful man like grandpa, so that Wo can protect mom and my sister. Jun Mocking looked at Dao Tao, who was more than 2 years old. No wonder Xiaju said that Dao Tao was very smart. She was indeed very smart. Dao Tao is so sensible at such a young age, which is commendable. Dao Tao's little face was full of expectations. Then will grandpa teach me kung fu? There is no way for me to become as powerful as grandpa by myself. Jun Mocking agreed readily, of course, but you are still young. Grandpa will teach you when you are 3 years old. Hearing this, Dao Tao suddenly stood up straight, raised her head and chest, and said like a young adult, the nest is not small anymore. Grandpa, can you teach the nest now? Jun Mocking looked at Dao Tao and thought that if Xiaoju had been so eager to learn, he wouldn't have had no one to inherit his mantle. Then grandpa will teach you a move first. If you can persist for 5 days, grandpa will teach you. Dao Tao nodded happily, okay. Jun Mocking put Susu down, then stood up straight, opened his legs, made fists with both hands and placed them on his waist, lowered his body, and squatted in a horse stance. After finishing, Jun Mocking looked at Dao Tao and said, come and imitate grandpa's movements. Okay. Dao Tao just saw the whole process of Jun Mocking doing the horse stance. He imitated Jun Mocking's movements and learned to do the horse stance according to Jun Mocking's movements just now. The first time he squatted on horseback, he learned it well. Jun Mocking saw it, stood up straight in front of Dao Tao, and bent down to correct his posture. Put your feet out a little bit. Dao Tao followed Jun Mocking's instructions and opened her feet slightly and moved 1 centimeter outward. Jun Mocking said again, yes, squat down a little more. Dao Tao's knees were slightly bent again. At this time, the chassis was a little unstable, and she felt that she might fall down in the next second. Jun Mocking stood up straight and sat down on the chair again. He picked up the teacup and brought it to his lips and took a few sips, but kept looking at Dao Tao. Susu blinked her beautiful big eyes twice and stared at Guo Guo curiously. Guo Guo, so awesome. As long as she can't do something, others can do it very well. As soon as he finished speaking, Dao Tao couldn't hold on any longer and took a few steps back. After he stood firm, he continued the same action as before and continued to squat on horseback. June Mocking saw it and found that Dao Tao was not only smart but also very perseverant. She was over 2 years old when she was full of curiosity and fun. It was rare to see someone as perseverant as Dao Tao. But June Mocking didn't say anything. There were many people who wanted to learn martial arts, but not many who had the perseverance. People with perseverance also need talent, otherwise they will not reach that height. If Xiaju had talent and perseverance, he would of course want to teach him everything he could. Feng Wei woke up after a long sleep and came over to drink tea and eat snacks with her father. As soon as she came over, she saw Dao Tao squatting on a horse, which she felt was a little strange. How did Dao Tao learn to squat on horseback? Dao Tao said very seriously, "I want to learn martial arts." Feng Wei was stunned for a moment when he heard this. Dao Tao not only likes to study literature but is also interested in martial arts. When she was pregnant, she didn't have such prenatal education. Feng Wei asked in confusion, "Why do you suddenly want to learn martial arts?" Dao Tao said, "I want to become a person as powerful as Grandpa." Feng Wei really didn't want to throw cold water on his son, but he still had to remind him. "Then you will have to persist for a long, long time to reach the heights of your grandfather." Dao Tao still said seriously, "The nest is fine." "Okay, as long as Dao Tao is happy." As soon as Feng Wei sat down, Susu rushed in, "Mom, I want to eat cakes." Without saying a word, Feng Wei took a piece from the plate and handed it to Susu, and reminded her warmly, "You can only eat one piece, we will have lunch later." "I know it." Susu happily took the cake and ate it while walking towards Dabai. Dao Tao persisted intermittently for a long time before June Mocking said, "Dao Tao, it's okay." After hearing this, Dao Tao stood up straight. After just a while, he was so tired that he was panting. Feng Wei took a piece of pastry and handed it to Dao Tao. "Dao Tao, eat a piece of pastry." Dao Tao took the cake and said, "Thank you, Mom." Then she ran to play with Susu. Feng Wei looked at his father. "Dad, do you really want to teach Dao Tao martial arts?" June Mocking said quietly, "Let him squat on horseback first. If he can persist, I will teach him and see if he has any talent in this area." Feng Wei said, "I don't know who Dao Tao looks like. With such a little person, it's time for eating, drinking, and playing. It's better for him to learn this and that. My prenatal education didn't teach them this." June Mocking said, "Dao Tao is not like you. When you were 3 years old, I taught you to squat on a horse. You sat on a small stool and said you were tired. Can you just sit obediently? Didn't Daddy say that Susu is like me? After all, he is greedy." In fact, Feng Wei also regretted a little. Why didn't he learn martial arts in the first place? Otherwise she can become very powerful. But having said that, someone with her temperament will definitely be too lazy to learn without anyone to supervise her. June Mocking just couldn't bear to let her suffer, so he let her eat, drink and have fun while she was training her basics, and have a happy childhood. June Mocking said, "Indeed, but girls don't have to work so hard. Daddy is still the best, open-minded, worthy of being a modern man, allowing me to spend my childhood without worries." Feng Wei was very fortunate that her dad was so good, better than anyone else, pampering her and spoiling her. However, Daddy still has a way of taking care of children. Under his pampering, she did not become arrogant and domineering, but developed a salty fish temperament. She only likes to compete with her dad. When others say how good her dad is, she will show off her dad. When others say how good her mother is, she will still bring out her dad. Because Daddy is really good. June Mocking said, "Daddy always feels that he owes you that you lost your mother's company when you were young. If he doesn't treat you twice as well, there will always be regrets." Although I also hope to have my mother by my side, but because of daddy, I don't feel sad when I miss my mother. There is a saying that as long as you have all the love, you can make up for some missing love. When Fenghui was a child, she saw that everyone else had a mother, but she didn't. Although she also wanted to have a mother, the love that daddy gave her was too much to accommodate. Daddy would not touch her a finger or say a harsh word. She had a happy childhood, so happy that she could ignore the mother's love she didn't have. Even if his daughter said so, June Mocking still felt that he owed it. Only with fatherly and motherly love can it be complete, without any regrets. In the afternoon, Dao Tao was practicing calligraphy, so June Mocking took Susu out of the palace to play, mainly because he heard Susu mention that there was a woman who looked very similar to Xiaju. He had seen someone very similar, and the only one who looked very similar was Xiaju's mother. Susu hugged June Mocking's neck. "Grandpa, some fruit." Since Susu knew that delicious and beautiful fruit could be bought on the street, the first thing he did when he took her out of the palace was to buy fruit. June Mocking would naturally not refuse his granddaughter's request. "Okay." Susu happily kissed June Mocking on the cheek. "Grandpa is so nice." June Mocking looked at Susu's smiling eyebrows and eyes, which looked very much like Xiaju. For a moment, he felt like he was back to Xiaju's childhood, often holding Xiaju, watching her act coquettishly, and watching her kiss his face because she was happy. Now Xiaju is almost 20 years old. June Mocking held Susu and came to the shop selling tea fruit after asking, "Good night?" Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 611. This pastry shop is the best pastry shop on this street, with many people buying it every day. When June Mocking came over with Susu in his arms, there were many people standing in the store, carefully selecting tea fruits. Susu was so excited when she saw the chaguazi. She pointed her little finger at the pink peach-shaped chaguazi and said, "Grandpa, this is the second best nest." Susu's voice is milky and milky, like marshmallows. Many customers noticed the pink glutinous rice dumplings and thought they were cute. However, he was quickly attracted by the man holding the glutinous rice dumpling. The man's eyebrows are as picturesque as if he had stepped out of a painting. His long black hair is very flowing. He is dressed in a blue and white gown. He is cold and dignified but also has a fairy-like temperament. When June Mocking was buying tea fruits with Susu in her arms, she was quickly surrounded by a group of people, most of whom were young ladies. I don't know which family's young master is so handsome. If there is such a handsome young master in the capital, why is there no news at all about him? The prince of the current dynasty is famous for his beauty in the capital. Who do you think is better than the man in front of you or the prince? The prince is the future prince, how can he compare with him? If word spreads, I'm afraid it will get him into trouble. Susu's two little hands lay on June Mocking's shoulders. Seeing so many people staring at them, she patted June Mocking's shoulders and said with a sweet voice, "Grandpa, many people are looking at us." The daughter-in-waiting, who was still hesitant to talk to her at first, suddenly widened her eyes when she heard her grandfather, wondering if she heard him wrong. "Did you hear what the girl called that young man? It seems to be called Grandpa." The waiting daughter showed an expression of disbelief, and looked at the handsome man in front of her again. Is such a young and handsome man already a grandfather? With June Mocking's strength, it was impossible not to hear the discussions of the waiting daughter. He glanced at them lightly and then looked away. He took out a peach-shaped tea fruit from the oil paper bag and handed it to Susu. "Eat tea fruit." When Susu saw the pink tea fruit, she immediately forgot about the group of women. She picked up the tea fruit with her little hand and put it into her mouth and took a bite. "Good time." June Mocking looked at Susu eating the tea fruit, her pink cheeks bulging. "Why don't you take a smaller bite?" Susu puffed up her cheeks and said, Why don't we take one less bite of that nest? June mocking asked, why not take one more bite? Susu said confidently, I took such a big bite in one bite, which means that the nest can still be used as a second one. I see. June mocking looked at Susu, who was also smart, but most of Susu's intelligence was used in eating. June mocking walked out of the pastry shop with Susu in her arms under the eyes of all the waiting ladies. Shuehui took out his money bag and paid the money, then followed them carrying the packaged tea fruits. While eating tea fruit, Susu stared at June mocking's mouth and asked, Grandpa, why don't you have a beard? In fact, Susu has long discovered that her grandpa and grandpa are different. Grandpa has a beard, but grandpa does not. June mocking said, because it's not time for grandpa to grow a beard. He will grow one in the future. Oh, I know, grandpa is handsome even with a beard. Susu did not forget to blow a rainbow fart at the end. June mocking praised, the Susu mouth is so sweet. Susu took another bite of the tea fruit and said, Grandpa, isn't the fruit as good as the mud? The fruit is always better than the gray one. June mocking said, Grandpa, go back and be with your mother. Susu said, Mom also loves the second fruit. If she wants 3, she can have 2. June mocking watched Susu lower her head and put half of the tea fruit in her hand into her mouth. Her fleshy cheeks were bulging like small buns. After coming out of the pastry shop, June mocking took Susu for a stroll, and Susu kept her mouth busy all the way. Walking on the street with one big and one small, it has undoubtedly become a sight to behold, attracting the attention of many passers-by, some sighing and some amazed. June mocking saw a tea house with elegant interior decoration, so she walked in with Susu in hand. The waiter greeted them enthusiastically and waved them in, guests, please come in. Arriving at the private room, June mocking first hugged Susu and sat on a chair, and then sat down. A pot of tea and a pot of hot water. Okay, sir, please wait a moment. The waiter was very fast and brought a pot of tea and a pot of hot water in no time. Susu had been thirsty for a long time after eating all the way. When she saw the teapot, she turned to look at June mocking and said, Grandpa, I need some water. Okay. June mocking touched the teapot first and felt that the temperature of the water was suitable. Then he lifted the teapot, took out a clean teacup, poured some warm water and placed it in front of Susu. Drink slowly. Susu picked up the teacup with both hands and brought it to her mouth, taking a sip. June mocking picked up another teapot and poured herself a cup of tea. She picked up the teacup with her slender fingers and glanced at Susu. It was okay to drink more water at the age of 2. Susu drank the water and put the teacup on the table. She looked at the people in the tea house curiously for a while. When she was about to look back, she saw a black figure and couldn't help but take a few more glances. When I saw the other person's face, I realized it was the person who looked like Mom from last time. She turned around and called June mocking, Grandpa, look at the mud. June mocking was drinking tea when he heard Susu calling him. He raised his head and looked at Susu, what's wrong? Susu pointed to the door and said, Grandpa, look over there. Feng Qingjian watched Qingrong pay for the tea before she walked out of the tea house. Qingrong put away her purse and followed. June mocking looked up and followed the direction of Susu's finger. He only saw a woman walking out of the tea house. He didn't see anyone special, so he looked back at Susu. Susu, what did you see? Susu looked back, and her finger followed, and she turned to look at June mocking. She left. June mocking asked, who left? Susu said, a woman who looks like my mother. June mocking was stunned for a moment, and without saying a word, he picked up Susu and strode out. Shuehui followed behind, and when the shopkeeper shouted that he hadn't paid yet, he took out a tael of silver and put it on the counter, and the shopkeeper stopped talking. After June mocking came out with Susu in his arms, he glanced at the street. Although there were not many people, he didn't see any familiar figures or faces at a glance. He lowered his head and asked Susu, "Susu, what is she wearing?" Susu answered quickly, "Black." June Mocking raised his head again and looked at the street, looking for a woman in black. Seeing a woman in black in the crowd, he held Susu without hesitation and flew over using Qinggong. It was the first time that Susu was held and flew, and she shouted excitedly, "It's so hot." June Mocking was looking for the woman who looked like Xiaju with expectation. When he caught up with the woman in black and saw his face, he found that she was not him. The woman was blocked and was about to get angry. When she looked up and saw the man's face, her eyes were full of surprise. The anger was gone, and she was a little shy. "Sir, is there anything wrong?" "You found the wrong person," June Mocking said, and turned around and left. The woman stayed there with a confused look on her face, thinking that she could have an encounter and a romantic encounter, but she found the wrong person? Susu tilted her head and asked in confusion, "Grandpa, why do you want that woman? Is she really my mother's sister?" "How could she be your mother's sister?" June Mocking paused and continued, "Your mother looks a lot like your grandmother." Grandpa is a little suspicious that the woman who looks like your mother might be your grandmother. Susu nodded, not quite understanding. "Oh, then I'll ask her next time I see her." June Mocking nodded, "Okay." Susu said in a baby voice, "Grandpa, I want another fruit." June Mocking ordered without saying a word, "Shuehuai, give one to Susu." Shuehuai opened the oil paper bag and handed it to Susu, letting her choose one herself. Susu said that she would eat one, and her little hand picked up one and didn't take any more. June Mocking took Susu to look for a while, and when he didn't find anyone, he took Susu back to the palace. Asterisk. In the dead of night, Feng Wu slept on the couch for an hour in the afternoon, and it was not so easy to fall asleep lying on the bed now. When she was about to fall asleep, Xiao Jinyan opened the quilt and got into bed, looking at the person with closed eyes, stretched out his hands and hugged her into his arms. Feng Wu only felt surrounded by the stove, and could feel the other person's hot body through the thin clothes. Xiao Jinyan just came back from the study. Since he came back, he continued to review the memorials. There were so many memorials that he could not finish reading them without working overtime. "Xiaoju." Feng Wu was not fully awake yet. She arched her back in someone's arms and hummed softly, "What are you doing?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his head, lifted her chin with his slender fingers, and found that her eyes were still closed. He lowered his head and kissed her lips a few times until the person in his arms responded, then said, "I want to talk to you." Feng Wu squinted her eyes. She was sleepy and it was difficult for her to open her eyes. "It's the middle of the night. Let's talk tomorrow." Xiao Jinyan lowered his head a little more and kissed her lips a few more times. "Xiaoju, don't you miss me? It's rare that Susu didn't come tonight. If I don't do something, I will be sorry for such a good night." Outside the house, the moon hung on the treetops. I miss you every day, but in my heart," I said, "seeing each other every day, sleeping together every day, how can I miss you so much?" Xiao Jinyan lowered his head and kissed her. This time it was not a few kisses, but a long kiss, and his hands were not idle. After Feng Wu was woken up, she looked at the abstinent man in front of her. She didn't know whether she was bewitched by his hand or because of this beautiful face. She compromised. Feng Wu didn't know when she fell asleep, but she knew that before she fell asleep, she saw the man persisting. The next day, Jun Wuxian took time to visit Dao Tao and Susu in the palace. Because he was busy with the wedding, Jun Mocking bought a house in the capital for the wedding, and then bought things. When Jun Wuxian saw Dao Tao and Susu, he found that they had grown a lot since last time, and Susu's face was a little rounder than Dao Tao's. Feng Wu didn't see Su Qingqing, and asked in confusion, "Brother, why didn't you bring Qingqing to the palace?" Jun Wuxian smiled and said, She has been busy these days and can't get away. I'll bring her to the palace next time. Feng Huiyu nodded and shouted to Dao Tao and Susu, "Baby, come here and call uncle." Dao Tao and Susu like the new pet tiger lion beast very much. They both want to climb on its back, but unfortunately their legs are too short to climb up. Hearing the call of their mother, the two little guys immediately ran over with a smile. "Mom, Mom." Feng Huiyu pointed at Jun Wuxian and introduced, "Baby, this is your uncle." Dao Tao and Susu looked at Jun Wuxian at the same time, their eyebrows curved, and said in unison, "Uncle." Jun Wuxian squatted down in front of them and looked at the two little guys who looked exactly the same. "You have grown a lot taller. Last time on the street, you were only this tall." Jun Wuxian said and made a stroke. Dao Tao and Susu saw that it had been 3 months since Jun mocking last time. Because they had only seen him once, they didn't remember. Jun Wuxian played with Dao Tao and Susu for a while, then looked up at his sister, "Where is father?" Feng Huiyu said, "He went out early in the morning. I heard he went to find someone." Jun Wuxian was a little confused. "Does father have any acquaintances here?" "I don't know. I heard that the person daddy is looking for looks a lot like me." Feng Huiyu got up late and didn't see her father. She still learned something from Susu. Jun Wuxian's eyes were a little confused. Asterisk. Feng Huiyu was free and planned to go to Xiun Pavilion to take a look. As soon as he walked out of the East Palace, he saw Yesuhan. He didn't know where he had gone these 2 days. "Third brother." Yesuhan walked over, "Where are you going?" Feng Huiyu said, "Let's go to Xiun Pavilion." Yesuhan said, "I have nothing to do, I'll go with you." Feng Huiyu nodded, "Okay." Feng Huiyu asked as he walked, "Where have you been these 2 days?" Yesuhan was stunned for a moment and answered perfunctorily, "I went out for a while." Feng Huiyu saw the familiar gate and reminded, "We're here." Yesuhan glanced at the gate in front of him and asked, "Are you here to visit a friend? This is too shabby. Is it because you are not favored?" Feng Huiyu smiled and shook his head, "No, this is where I used to live." Yesuhan opened his eyes wide, "Did you live here before?" "When I first came here, I was punished to be grounded." "Let's go in and take a look," Feng Huiyu said and walked in. Yesuhan also walked in with doubts. As soon as he came in, Xiao Gaiza came up to him with a smile, "What do you want, master?" Feng Huiyu said, "Catch an old hen to make soup." "One seems not enough. Catch 2. "I'll go catch them right away." Xiao Gaizi happily walked towards the chicken coop. Feng Huiyu turned his head and looked at Yesuhan, "I'll take you to see my chicken coop." Yesuhan was stunned for a long time when he heard about the old hen. "Okay." The chicken coop was not far away, and he arrived in a short walk. When Yesuhan saw a group of chickens and ducks in the chicken coop, he was shocked for a long time. "You raise chickens and ducks in the palace?" Feng Huiyu felt quite accomplished. "Yes, there is also a vegetable garden." Yesuhan. Afterwards, Feng Huiyu took Yesuhan to see his own small vegetable garden. After being away for so long, Xiao Gaizi and the others took good care of it. Pak choy, lettuce, carrots, green, you can tell at a glance that they are well raised. Yesuhan was stunned. Feng Huiyu brought 2 chickens back to the Hehuan Palace, and Yesuhan was still a little bit unbelievable. Susu and the white tiger were hungry after playing, and it was not time for dinner yet. When she walked back with her short legs, she saw a black figure and subconsciously shouted, "Come down." Feng Qingjian was just passing by the East Palace, but was stopped by someone. She looked down and found that it was the little girl from last time. "Good night, please give me monthly tickets and recommendation tickets."